School Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. Iran stands tall as Trump prepares for the attack. He said it could happen any day now to free the Iranian people. Lies. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, revolution is a way of life, and revolution is for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I got some revolutionary breakfast for y'all. World War III, we can't get away from it. The Epstein files. Pay attention to Bill Clinton. Refused to testify. He's being held in contempt of court. He probably go to jail. All of that is why we are attacking Iran any day now.
The commander of Aerospace Force of Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Brigadier General Majid Musavi, said via Al Mayadeen on Wednesday that the Air Force is at peak readiness, placing IRGC on the highest level of alert, following threats of U.S. intervention and regional threats. Iranian missile forces are at maximum readiness, Musavi added, stating that war damage has been repaired, and production in some aerospace sectors now exceeds levels seen since the 12-day war against Israel last year. He asserted that Iranian military with its missile arsenal is ready to respond decisively and forcefully to any aggression. The IRGC commander described the deployment as part of peak military readiness, with elite units and missile cities and drones activated in anticipation of potential external threats. According to Iran, these steps were taken amid increasing threats from Trump and Israel, as both countries plot internal riot to overthrow the Iranian government. However, on the same day, drivers filmed the situation inside Tehran as on previous nights, with the movement of citizens and cars running smoothly. Contrary to media reports, no crowds were recorded in 22 of the city's neighborhoods. Shops and businesses remained open until midnight. According to analysts, the widespread participation of citizens in recent rallies and confrontations with riot control networks contributed to the restoration of calm. This not only thwarts U.S.-Israeli goals, but also gives the Iranian military free space to prepare a retaliatory operation when Iran begins to be attacked. Musavi is not new to this arena. He is known as one of the key figures behind Iranian strategic missile program.
Salute to my brother Tim Snow at Texas. To my brother Tim Slow at Texas Prison Story. Salute, family. Just giving the people a World War III alert, little update. Iran has put their missile systems on high alert. They are ready for this war that Trump is getting us into to change y'all attention away from the Epstein files. That Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton yesterday refused to testify. They're going to be held in contempt of court. Bill Clinton said the contempt of court is used to lock me up. Yes, Mr. Clinton, you're going to jail. And it's all about Epstein. But y'all going to get this war before y'all see this Epstein file. So salute to my brother.
It seems each section has authority to fire independently if needed. This tactic ensures cutting communications does not paralyze the whole system. Now we reach...
This is serious business. Y'all going to remember, I tell y'all this is going to happen. Maybe a day or two. Could happen today. The big war in the Middle East.
These days, media attention regarding a potential U.S.-Iran war is high. Some analysts suggest the U.S. might have a three-phase attack plan. In this video, we will analyze what Iran might do responding, so join me as we explore this intense military scenario together. We want to examine the scenario if the U.S. strikes
now,
first.
what I want to take a look at now is just a little bit of what is Iran plans. What do we want to see? Because remember the last time the 12-day war happened, I'd already showed y'all the Iranian missile. People on Core Figure TV was not surprised Iran was able to pummel Israel and humble them that fast if they had been watching, because I showed y'all the missile power and the technology that the Iranians had. Putin came out and warned Trump today it would be a horrible mistake to attack the Iranians. Why? Because of what he knows they have and what him and China done sent over them.
How would Iran likely react and survive against these specific plans? We will look at the defensive moves and potential counter strategies. This is a deep dive into a complex military chess game. First, let's quickly review these three plans simply for everyone here. Phase 1 is total blackout. Phase 2 involves deceiving the radars. Phase 3 is heavy strikes with bunker busters on underground sites. Now the question is, will the other side remain tied up? Analysts believe Iran's military doctrine is likely based on asymmetric warfare, meaning when the opponent has superior tech, you change the field. Potential survival in this scenario depends on concealment and deceiving enemies. Let's see what is possible against Phase 1, known as blackout. The US intends to blind satellites to cut commander communications off. A likely solution is using a massive underground fiber optic network. Cables that are buried deep in soil receive no jamming signals. This network likely allows orders to move without needing the sky. Cyber attacks on power plants are dangerous, but solutions likely exist. It is probable that vital military systems are separated from grids. Using giant diesel generators in bunkers supplies electricity to the bases. Without network connection, computer viruses likely cannot shut the system down. Another key point in Phase 1 is decentralized or mosaic command, meaning if the center link is cut, units likely act alone if needed. It seems each section has authority to fire independently if needed. This tactic ensures cutting communications does not paralyze the whole system. Now we reach Phase 2, where the US sends hundreds of decoys. The goal is for radars to turn on and reveal locations. The likely tactic here is strategic patience and keeping radars off. Operators will probably not fire at every bright spot on radar. A strong possibility is using passive or inactive radars in regions. These radars do not send waves, they just listen to the environment. This way, the radar location is hidden, but enemies are detected. Anti-radiation missiles likely cannot lock on to something that has no signal. Furthermore, the visual and optical observation network might be activated soon, using thermal cameras that see jet engine heat from far away. These systems need no radar, and electronic warfare is useless here. Stealth hunters might not easily hide their engine heat from sensors. A common military trick is using deceptive transmitters in the desert. These devices likely simulate S-400 radar signals to divert incoming missiles. Expensive missiles might be fired at scrap metal planted in deserts. This means buying time and saving the main systems for battle. If fighters pass through, then point defense and mobile probability comes, systems that likely move fast so they are not hit easily. The shoot and scoot tactic here could guarantee system survival well. Basically, no defense system should stay in one fixed spot long. We reach Phase 3, the US B-2 bombers and giant busters. The reality is concrete might not stop a precise double bombing, so the likely solution is not fortification, but rapid dispersion movement. Sensitive materials are likely not in one place, moving constantly around trucks. Reports show Iran has likely focused on movement using normal trucks, ordinary trucks moving on roads and carrying the materials inside them. Identifying the cargo of a moving truck is hard for satellites. Hitting a moving and unclear target from air is very risky. Another probability is building decoy facilities or large mock-ups in the mountains. Bombers might target empty mountains with heavy bombs in this scenario. Digging false tunnels that go nowhere confuses the attacker completely there. Wasting enemy resources is a likely principle to reduce real damage. What about countering cruise missiles that fly at very low altitude? Use of anti-aircraft guns likely focuses on the heights and valleys, creating a wall of fire in valley paths missiles pass through. Also, probable use of smoke to blind laser guidance systems there. A modern technique is probably GPS warfare, or diverting location signals. GPS signals might be manipulated around sensitive sites to cause errors. This could cause smart bombs to hit the ground with error. When coordinates are wrong, precise weapons might become ineffective in combat. But experts say passive defense alone against such attacks is insufficient. System survival likely depends on raising the attack cost for opponents. Military doctrine dictates using missiles before destruction occurs on the ground. Maybe before bombers arrive, missile silos might have already been activated. Probable firing of ballistic missiles at regional air bases is a scenario. The goal is likely hitting runways so planes cannot take off. This means an action to slow down the opponent's air operations. If bases become unsafe, continuing operations becomes very difficult for attackers. At sea, it is unlikely we see classic ship versus ship. Swarm tactics using many speedboats seems much more likely to happen. Probable rush towards ships that are firing Tomahawk cruise missiles now. This naval chaos likely disrupts the focus of the operation there. Using cheap drones to saturate defense systems is a valid option. When target numbers are high, attacker radars might get fully saturated. This causes expensive defense missiles to be wasted on cheap targets. In this crowd, probability of main missiles hitting increases very much. Probable activation of aligned forces in region to create new fronts. This scenario diverts political and military focus of the attacking side. Survival means not letting the enemy focus comfortably only on you. Expanding the battlefield is a risk that changes enemy calculations significantly. Psychological and media war, highlighting potential casualties to pressure public opinion. Usually governments cannot prolong war under heavy pressure of public protests. The defender tries to control the war narrative and look like victim. This diplomatic pressure might pull the brake on military operations sooner. Finally, the likely goal in this scenario is not classic victory. The goal is probably just survival and keeping main structure intact. If after attack, response capability remains, then strategy has been successful. Surviving the structure against heavy attack is itself a military achievement. So we saw tech superiority might be challenged by asymmetric tactics. War is a mix of iron and intelligence, not always iron. Concrete might break, but dispersion strategy can make survival possible there. This analysis was purely a review of military probabilities on paper.
Donald Trump is expected to meet his top advisors today to explore how to respond to Iran's crackdown on anti-government protesters.
US President Donald Trump hints at military intervention in Iran, saying that Washington is strong.
When Washington wants to sell a war, it usually starts the same way. First, it reframes a country's pain into a morality play. Then it reframes that country's sovereignty into bad behavior. And then it reframes foreign pressure into help. After that, any unrest that follows gets packaged as the people rising up, while the state is told it has no right to restore order, no right to defend itself, and no right to exist unless it obeys the empire. That is exactly what this moment feels like. Iran under an intense, multi-layered siege, and Donald Trump leaning into language and posture that signal he is prepared to turn that siege into open war, while presenting himself as some kind of savior. And it is happening as the so-called protest narrative begins to lose steam, not because the Iranian state is afraid of its people, but because the spectacle has limits when reality sets in. Iran is not a blank canvas for foreign fantasies. It is a sovereign nation with institutions, a national identity forged through decades of pressure, and a population that has seen this movie before. where outside powers exploit economic strain, amplify chaos, and then claim moral authority to intervene. The more the unrest collapses as a credible revolution story, the more the warmongers lean into escalation, because their preferred outcome was never reform, it was rupture. Iranians on the street rejects any revolution suggestion.
پیامی دادید نسبت به ترامپ به خاطر گزاف گروهی که
ترامپ من آدم حساب نمی‌کنم باش حرف بزن ولی بمیره.
من معترضم ولی بخواد پای این لجنزارا و صهیونیست و سکتوله‌هاش اینجا باز بشه نه ما هرچی هم با هم دیگه مشکل داشته باشیم ولی این که بخواید اینجا قطع علم کنید نه ما هستیم جونمون رو پای این کشور می‌ذاریم.
کشوری به ایران من نمیتونه دست بزنه. یا فریب خوردن یا کلا از جاهای دیگه اومدن. ما مردم تهرانیم و باشش هم وایسادیم.
کسی که از این خاک از این مرزبون باشه آرامش مردمش رو به هم نمیزنه.
ارزشو ندارم ما یکی وجب از خاک ایرانمون رو بهشون نمیدیم. ما تمام فدای رهبرمون فدای کشورمون خیلی شدیداً باید مجازات بشه.
ببین اون موقعی که 8 سال ما جنگیدیم یه سیم خاردار هم نداشتیم. الان که دیگه در حدی نیست. نه اینجا ونزوئلاست که بخوای شبونه بخوای یه بازی سوری رو نه دریا نجس نمیشه با این صحبت‌ها. جان ما و همه ایرانی‌ها فدای رهبر ما. یه سری اونور مرز یه خیالای باطلی کردن.
رهبر زنید
جانم فدای رهبر بدون هیچ نگرانی از نگاه‌های دوستان آشنایان
هنوز به یه سری گرونی‌ها یه سری اتفاقات هستیم ولی
عاشقتم آقا جون چی بگم جونمو برات میدم هر چی دستور بدی دستور بده با کله بریم تو شکمشون هر چی شما بگید.
من واقعا با جون دارم و چقدر دوست دارم.
مردم ایران همونطوری که تا الان بودن باید چشمشون فقط به سخن رهبری باشه. کلام ایشون همه رو آروم میکنه.
سید علی عاشقتم.
YouTube censor videos like this, so like and share to help me out. Thank you. Let's be honest about what the unrest has meant on the ground. Hundreds of deaths have been reported, with widely cited figures putting the toll above 500, alongside thousands of arrests. That level of bloodshed is not a talking point. It is a national wound. But the Western framing tries to weaponize that wound. It turns tragedy into a pretext. Look how unstable Iran is. Now is the moment to finish it. That is not solidarity with Iranian lives. That is opportunism. If they truly cared about Iranian lives, they would stop fanning conflict and stop turning every internal crisis into a launchpad for regime change fantasies. War criminal Benjamin Netanyahu latched on this to lie more about the Iranian people.
ישראל עוקבת בדריכות על הנעשה באיראן. הפגנות למען החירות התפשטו ברחבי המדינה. העם בישראל, העולם כולו, משתאה מול הגבורה האדירה של אזרחי איראן. ישראל תומכת במאבקם לחופש ומגנה בתקיפות את מעשי הטבח ההמוני באזרחים חפים מפשע. כולנו תקווה שהאומה הפרסית תשתחרר מקרוב מעול העריצות, וכשיום זה יגיע, ישראל ואיראן יחזרו להיות שותפות נאמנות בבניית עתיד של שגשוג ושלום לשני העמים.
The hypocrisy becomes impossible to ignore when you look at Trump's posture at home. In the United States, massive domestic protests have erupted over federal brutality and immigration enforcement. Americans have marched in multiple cities, demanding accountability.
This is wrong. What's happening in this country is wrong, and it has to end.
Denouncing what they describe as terror and abuse of power, and confronting an aggressive federal apparatus. Trump's political ecosystem has been accused of escalating crackdowns while dismissing or smearing protesters at home. Yet the same man points at Iran and claims he must intervene to save people from repression. You can't preach freedom abroad while a large segment of your own population is on the streets accusing your administration of violence, impunity, and abuse. That isn't moral leadership. That is projection. This is where the phrase America First becomes a kind of punchline. Trump postures as a nationalist, but his nationalism is selective. It becomes a flag to wave domestically, while he simultaneously seeks to detonate wars abroad for political leverage. If America were truly first, the priority would be addressing domestic fractures, restoring public trust, and confronting the failures that have put Americans in the streets protesting federal power. Instead, he redirects outward because foreign enemies are convenient. They let him turn internal chaos into external theater. They let him dress up political survival as strength. You also cannot separate this moment from the post-2025 reality. Iran is not being threatened in a vacuum. Iran has already endured direct aggression and a dangerous cycle of escalation, including a major war with Israel. That war did not just damage infrastructure, it deepened the logic of deterrence. Every sovereign state that survives a major attack rebuilds its defenses. It repairs what was hit, restores readiness, and sends a message. Do not miscalculate. Iran's rebuilding of military capability after that conflict is not a sign of evil intent. It is the most basic, predictable behavior of any state that refuses to be conquered. That is why Trump's declaration posture, his signaling, his threats, his constant suggestion of force reads in Tehran not as talk, but as preparation. It is understood as the next phase of a long campaign: sanctions, sabotage, assassinations, psychological operations, and then, when the target refuses to collapse, direct military coercion. That is the imperial script, and Iran has lived through it long enough to recognize the pattern before the final page is turned. Now, let's talk about the military menu Trump likely imagines, because this is where American arrogance usually hides behind technology. It is always the same set of ideas: precision airstrikes, cruise missiles launched from ships, drones conducting persistent pressure, cyber operations aimed at disrupting command and control and infrastructure, and the threat of special forces raids or broader ground action. These options get discussed in Washington as if war is a spreadsheet problem: inputs, outputs, risk tolerances. But Iran is not a shooting gallery, and the Middle East is not a laboratory. Every limited strike carries escalation risk because Iran is not a passive target that absorbs humiliation and says thank you. And the deeper problem is structural. The U.S. has placed a wide, exposed footprint across the region. Bases, personnel, logistics hubs, naval assets spread across multiple countries. Washington likes to talk like it controls escalation, but that belief collapses when you remember how many vulnerable nodes exist and how many actors can be pulled into a regional crisis. The U.S. can strike Iran, but it cannot strike Iran without inviting consequences that ripple across an entire theater. From my perspective, the real purpose of Iran's deterrent is not conquest. It is prevention. It is to make the price of attacking Iran so high that the attacker reconsiders. Iran's missile force, drone capabilities, air defenses, cyber capacity, and naval asymmetric doctrine are designed for one thing: to deny the fantasy of a clean, painless U.S. victory. Iran's message is simple: if you open this door, you don't get to choose what comes through it. This is why threats against Iran are so reckless. Iran has the capacity to respond in ways that are not symbolic. The region is full of strategic targets, military facilities, critical infrastructure, shipping lanes, and high-value assets that would become vulnerable in any large-scale conflict. Even if Washington imagines it can suppress Iranian response, the realities of geography, dispersal, and asymmetric capacity make that confidence dangerous. Iran does not need to match America in global projection. It needs to impose localized costs that shatter the attacker's political will and expose the fragility of their regional posture. And here is where Israel's role becomes central, because Trump's posture toward Iran rarely exists without Zionist pressure and alignment. Israel has its own incentives to keep Iran as the eternal existential threat, because that narrative unifies hawkish politics and justifies relentless militarization. But Israel is also internally strained. Domestic unrest, political instability, and public anger have been persistent. When a leadership class faces serious legitimacy pressure at home, the temptation to externalize crises to manufacture a larger enemy and declare national emergency becomes powerful. In that context, escalation with Iran becomes not only a strategic obsession, but a political lifeline. The Netanyahu factor in my reading is not merely about ideology, it is about survival. A leader under pressure often chooses war rhetoric because it changes the subject. It turns internal dissent into disloyalty. It reframes accountability as weakness. It buys time. And if Israel's leadership is gambling that Iran can be struck without catastrophic blowback, that gamble becomes a form of collective punishment for the entire region. Israelis included, because a major war with Iran is not a controlled event. It is a structural shock. Now, let's move to the economic dimension, because this is where the empire's recklessness becomes everyone's problem. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a talking point. It is a strategic artery. A significant share of global oil flows through that corridor. Any serious conflict involving Iran immediately injects risk into energy markets, shipping insurance, supply chains, and industrial planning. The immediate outcome would likely be a sharp energy shock. higher oil prices, higher transport costs, higher food prices, inflation spikes, and a wave of economic instability that hits ordinary households first. And the cruel irony is that Trump's own political base would feel it most sharply. When oil prices spike, it's not elites who suffer first. It's working families paying more for fuel, food, and heating. It's small businesses absorbing higher logistics costs. It's manufacturing and transport taking hits. So, the same man who claims to defend the American worker would be setting off a chain reaction that punishes them, simply to posture as a strong man abroad. There's another layer that makes this even more humiliating for war planners. After the initial spike, markets can behave in counterintuitive ways. Severe disruption can trigger demand destruction, recession fears, reduced consumption, economic contraction. Over time, alternative supplies and adjustments can alter price dynamics. But none of that cancels the immediate chaos. The first phase would be shock, panic, and volatility. It would be the kind of economic tremor that shakes alliances, as Europe and Asia question why they should suffer energy pain because Washington wanted another war in the Middle East. Which brings us back to the central lie behind all of this, that war is moral order. In reality, war is often narrative management. It is a tool leaders use when they can't govern their own crises, when they can't unify their own societies, when they can't deliver economically, when they can't face accountability. So, they search for an enemy abroad because enemies are simpler than reforms. They search for a battlefield elsewhere because it lets them avoid fighting corruption, inequality, and institutional decay at home. And in that context, Iran becomes the convenient target, demonized for decades, misunderstood on purpose, and constantly framed as an abnormal state that must be corrected. But Iran's survival is precisely what infuriates them. Iran absorbs pressure and refuses to collapse on schedule. Iran rebuilds after attacks. Iran restores deterrence. Iran continues to speak the language of sovereignty in a world where many states have been reduced to client status. So, when Trump postures like he is ready to invade, what he is really declaring is the empire's impatience. He is declaring that sanctions and sabotage and psychological warfare are not enough, that the target still stands, that the people have not fractured the way Washington hoped, and that the protest storyline is no longer delivering a clean path to collapse. The answer in his mind, onto my mind, is not humility or diplomacy. It is escalation. If Trump truly wants to protect lives, the path is de-escalation and diplomacy, not threats and invasion fantasies. If he truly wants stability, he would stop playing with regional fire and stop feeding the logic of permanent conflict that benefits only arms dealers and political opportunists. And if the world wants to avoid catastrophe, it should treat Iran as what it is, a proud, resilient nation that will not be intimidated into surrender, and that will not accept foreign-engineered chaos being sold as liberation, because this is the deeper truth. Every time an empire thinks it has found the perfect moment to strike Iran, when it imagines the country is weakened by economic pain or unrest, it is tempted to miscalculate. But Iran's modern history is defined by survival under siege. And if anyone insists on turning threats into war, they should remember something empires always forget. The easiest thing is to start a war. The hard part is living with what you started. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel to support my work. See you in the next one.
The world to support a regime change. And of course, Zelensky, of all people, is encouraging the world to support a regime change or a color revolution in Iran. Current president of Ukraine, or rather the current dictator, had this to say. He said that what's happening in Iran right now is effectively an uprising. And every decent person on the planet truly wants Iranians to free themselves from this regime. And some of you all probably have no idea how ironic it is that Zelensky, of all people, will be calling for a color revolution, especially a color revolution instigated by the United States, especially everything that Ukraine has gone through under these very specific circumstances. But let's review, shall we, and see if it's a good idea for Iran to take the advice of this idiot. So, a color revolution happened in Ukraine in 2014. A lot of you all might not know that. But that color revolution wasn't a natural uprising. It was an attempt to overthrow, a successful one, unfortunately, to overthrow the legitimate, democratically elected government in Ukraine. We know the United States helped facilitate the coup, the Maidan coup in Ukraine, because they weren't that shy about it. Victoria Nuland frequented Ukraine like passport boys frequent Brazil during Carnival. And what was the result? Democratically elected government overthrow. Nazis take over Ukraine effectively. The most vulnerable populations of eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region, the Donetsk region, end up getting attacked and bombed by the Ukrainian government just because the Ukrainian government doesn't want them to want to be part of Russia. Then the US and NATO forces Ukraine to pretend as if they're going to get admission into NATO, which then triggers Russia to start a war with them, leading to generations of their male population being decimated. And now they effectively have a dictator in power because the US won't allow them to hold elections, nor will they hold Zelensky accountable for all of the dictatorial authoritarian bullshit that he is engaged in since the war has started. If anything, hearing that Zelensky is suggesting that the people of Iran overthrow their own government, if they had any notion of a possibility of supporting the overthrow of their own government, yeah, that shit just went out the window. They're gonna look at that situation in Ukraine and be like, guys, I don't really think we should be taking advice from this dude. I don't think he really knows what he's doing based off of that situation over there. So to be clear, the list of the people that are wanting to overthrow Iran's government right now includes Volodymyr Zelensky, Donald Trump, the pedophile,
Nazis,
Netanyahu, the genocidal maniac, Fox News and CNN, the Democrats and the Republicans, and somehow some of y'all actually believe that those people, a number of whom are literally starting wars or engaged in genocide right now, those people have the best interest of the Iranian people in mind. Come the
Iranian intelligence ministry announced that it had seized a large number of illegal Starlink devices and another advanced electronics for espionage and sabotage activities, IRID reported on January 13, 2026. Officials said the shipment originated from a country in the region and was intended for distribution in provinces affected by recent unrest. The seized items included 100 long-range receivers, 50 base transceiver stations BTS signal boosters, 7435G modems, and 799 smartphones, all of which could provide covert internet and mobile phone access in remote areas, targeting military, security, industrial, and missile sites for future wars. The intelligence agency added that since June 2025, Starlink ownership in Iran has been subject to espionage laws, and they have collaborated with local activists to coordinate protests and smuggle news back. A riot tech group used Starlink to circumvent Iranian internet blackout, and their efforts continue to operate successfully with a 90.71% connection success rate, even as the Iranian government made every effort to disrupt the signal. However, the intelligence agency managed to discover the illegal equipment through citizens who reported them. The IRGC intelligence organization announced it had received over 400,000 calls from Iranian citizens, reporting suspicious movements and individuals, leading to a significant increase in identifying foreign-backed riot leaders.
Today, we want to talk about a weapon changing the Gulf equations. If you want to know how a missile hunts like an eagle, stay. In this video, we reveal secrets of the smart Fateh Mobin missile. All right, friends, let's get straight to the point in this fascinating missile. Fateh Mobin isn't just metal, it is a very smart flying robot. We are dealing with a short-range ballistic missile specialized in hitting bullseyes. You might ask, what does short range actually mean for this specific weapon? Its range is roughly about 200 to 300 kilometers maximum. But don't be fooled by this seemingly short range, the story differs. This missile is designed for fast, tactical, and highly precise warfare battles. It is exactly what is needed to control the vital Strait of Hormuz. You are dealing with a skilled sniper who never misses from close. It is not built for long intercontinental flights, but for surgical strikes. This precision is what makes it a game changer in regional conflicts. Imagine a marksman who guarantees a hit every single time he shoots. Let's step back a bit and see where this genius comes from. Fateh Mobin is actually the handsome, modern grandson of the Fateh 110 family. Iranians worked for years on this lineage to reach this evolution level. In fact, Mobin is considered the fourth or fifth mutated generation here. Now let's check its appearance because there is a huge visual difference. If you look closely at the nose, it is not sharp metal. The tip of this missile is slightly flattened with a small window. That glass port is exactly the seeing eye that changes all rules. This system, called an image matching seeker, is the masterpiece of this missile. It means in the final dive, it sees and recognizes the target. Just imagine, the missile visually locks onto the target and holds on. This capability makes Fateh Mobin almost invincible against modern electronic warfare attacks. Why do I say invincible? Because enemies try to jam missile GPS, but when the missile sees with its own eyes, it needs no waves. Even if all satellite signals are cut, Mobin finds its way home. This is a real nightmare for ships relying on electronic jamming defense. Another cool feature of Fateh Mobin is its advanced composite solid fuel. Solid fuel means the missile is always ready like a loaded bullet. Unlike liquid fuel, you don't need hours to fuel up before launch. This speed in the battlefield, where seconds matter, means life or death. Now you might ask, how fast is the missile itself flying? Fasten your seatbelts, friends, because the speed at impact is truly terrifying. It reaches something around 3 to 5 Mach when hitting the target. That is 3 to 5 times the speed of sound, shockingly fast. The body material has an interesting story, made of composites and carbon. These materials have two benefits. First, they drastically reduce the missile weight. Second, and more importantly, they reduce radar reflection, making it stealthier. It means enemy radars notice something is coming much later than usual. Iranian designers worked hard on aerodynamics to make it highly maneuverable. Small control fins on the warhead allow it to turn during dives. These maneuvers let the missile dodge anti-missile systems that intercept straight lines. Imagine a soccer ball that suddenly curves mid-air towards the goal. Speaking of accuracy, let me say this missile is truly pinpoint. The circular error probable, or CEP, is estimated to be under 5 meters. If you want to hit a specific building center, it hits that room. This precision for a ballistic missile moving at supersonic speed is amazing. Now let's see exactly what this missile carries along with itself. The Fateh Mobin warhead weighs between 400 and 600 kilograms. This amount of explosive is enough to destroy a destroyer or bunker. The explosion type is designed to create maximum destruction at impact point. The interesting point is this missile has two roles, ground and sea. It can plow an enemy airfield and also sink large warships. This flexibility allows commanders to have open hands choosing targets instantly. Especially in the Persian Gulf where targets move, this is pure gold. Hunting moving naval targets is one of the hardest tasks for missiles. Since the ship moves, the missile must correct its path until impact. But Fateh Mobin tracks the ship's movement with that sharp infrared eye. This means enemy ships cannot escape even if they move in zigzags. Another cool feature of Fateh Mobin is launching from mobile platforms. This missile can be camouflaged on trucks and fired from anywhere. It even has the capability to launch from standard commercial shipping containers. This means the enemy never knows where the next strike comes from. Let's talk a bit about the history of its unveiling event. This missile was unveiled in August 28, 2018, with the defense minister present. At that time, everyone was surprised how Iran miniaturized the guidance system. Videos released showed the missile hitting a small target in the sea. Western sources and military experts could not deny this technical progress. Institutes like the Washington Institute wrote that this missile changes power balance. They realized Iran now has a cheap, precise way to fight warships. This is a classic asymmetric threat, cheap missile versus billion-dollar ship. Another technical point is this missile is entirely indigenous and domestic. That means 0 to 100% of design and parts are local. This is important because sanctions cannot stop its production or repairs. The production line of these missiles can run massively around the clock. Operational capability in night, day, and all weather conditions is crucial. The infrared or thermal sensor sees in absolute darkness like bright daylight. Even in cloudy weather or battlefield smoke, these sensors work perfectly, so the enemy cannot count on the dark night for safe movement. Compared to the Khalij Fars missile, Fateh Mobin is a level higher. Khalij Fars had optical guidance, but Mobin has advanced thermal image guidance. Also, the body design is stealthier, making radar detection harder. This shows Iranian engineers have a special obsession with upgrading their products. Many ask if this missile has been used in real combat battles. Although tested many times, no official war report has been published yet. Of course, in Revolutionary Guards drills, it showed power and destroyed targets. Those exercises were enough to send the necessary message to regional rivals. Strategically, Fateh Mobin is considered part of Iran's doctrine of deterrence. The main goal is for the enemy to know they will get hit. The existence of many such missiles on coasts raises the conflict risk. This is exactly what pushes the shadow of war away through power. Well, friends, we reached the end of reviewing this smart Iranian hunter. Fateh Mobin showed what the combination of AI and missile power yields. A weapon that has eyes, has a brain, and an iron fist. Hope you enjoyed this video and found the information useful today. If you like this style of military and tech videos, hit like. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cool video. Write in comments which missile or fighter jet we should cover next. Until the next video and another fascinating review, take care. Goodbye.
And they concluded that the United States administration is about to approve a strike against Iran. This came following successive meetings that the Israeli cabinet has been conducting in the past few days and weeks that relate to Iran. In one of these instances, the Israeli media reported that Israel's situation in terms of readiness and preparedness for a war in Iran was at the highest level, and also there were warnings and alerts that Israel is about to have a major event with Iran. This was published in Israeli media. The Political Security Cabinet meeting has ended. A government source told Reuters that the cabinet will be briefed on the prospects for overthrowing the Ayatollah regime in Iran and US intervention. Another source said that the assessment is that US President Donald Trump will decide to attack. But the scope and timing of the response remain unknown. In the meantime, it wasn't only this, it was multiple statements coming from the United States and several actions on the ground in US bases in the region of West Asia or the Middle East that relate to this. The first one was the post of Donald Trump, who said that the Iranians should keep protesting. Take over your institutions, save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I have canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stop. Help is on its way. MIGA, make Israel great again. He probably meant to make Iran great again, but everyone knows what MIGA is and what this whole MAGA is and America first and all of this nonsense is. Exactly. So we have that, and we also have preparations on the ground. Why? Well, the Qatari officials and the Iranian officials, they had a phone call. There was a phone call between the head of the senior office of security in Iran, National Security Council, with Mohammed bin Jassim Al Thani, the Prime Minister of Qatar. During that phone call, they said here in this statement that they were talking about the cooperation between the two countries and increasing this coordination, discussing the latest developments in the region, alongside multiple mutually important issues. Also, the Qatari Prime Minister, during that phone call, he added that he supports the efforts to de-escalate and have a peaceful conclusion to matters. Really and truly what happened here is a warning that came from Iran. And that warning that hasn't been discussed in this statement is that if Al-Udaid base will be used to attack Iran, it's going to be destroyed this time. It's not only going to be 1 or 2 strikes. Why are we saying that? Well, it's because there were multiple statements confirming that there were movements coming for American fighter jets and B-52 bombers in that location. And they spoke about multiple preparations coming from the United States, not only in Al-Udaid base, but in other parts of the Middle East region. That led to more calls coming from multiple Gulf states saying that they outright refuse an attack against Iran. As a matter of fact, Israeli media said that Saudi Arabia supports Iran in launching a strike against Israel. That's what Israeli media said. Saudi Arabia supports an attack of Iran against Israel. But other statements came in the form of mutual statements coming from Gulf states opposing a war against Iran and the Saudi country opposing any sort of use of its airspace to conduct an attack against Iran. In the meantime, Iranian media is playing wartime videos and songs in what many people consider to be a preparation for what's coming. Similar videos were published before, well, during the previous wars that Iran had, and also during the 12-day war that they had with Israel. What do we have here? Well, we have escalations. Firstly, it's not only the American administration and the Israeli administration speaking about a potential attack. There are also many European leaders entertaining the idea of supporting the protesters inside of Iran. One of them was none other than this guy here, the German chancellor, who said that he's worried about the attacks in Iran and that violence is an expression of weakness, believe it or not. This is what the German chancellor said, of course, ignoring everything that the German authorities do against civilians inside of Germany, like, for example, these attacks here of the German police beating men and women up until they bleed and sometimes go unconscious simply because they protest against genocide. They protest against genocide, and this is what they get from the German police. The levels of hypocrisy and double standards reached peak levels this time, with these European leaders claiming that they support the protests inside of Iran. People talking about piles of bodies. Piles of bodies? The piles of bodies are still in Gaza. You know, there are piles of bodies under the rubble of the bombs that you sent Israel to bomb children with. Reports in Gaza that 8 infants died from hypothermia the past 24 hours because Israel is banning any sort of necessary equipment and aid and blankets and temporary housing and tents to deal with the catastrophic situation that was as a result from this genocide supported by the Western establishment. Not only that, Ansarullah in Yemen are also at peak readiness now. They said that any attack against Iran will be viewed as an attack against the Islamic nation, and we will not be sitting silent. We will be attacking American and Israeli ships in the Red Sea. Chances are the attacks of Ansarullah are going to extend beyond that. They are going to go further than these locations. So everything is intensifying. And although Donald Trump and also the Israeli side are trying to keep a level of ambiguity to support or bolster their chances of somewhat of a limited success, even if they can dare talk about potential success inside of Iran, that they can keep a level of surprise element here in case they do go on a joint attack. Israel would love it if the United States begins this attack so that it would appear to be as something between Israel and Iran. However, chances are the Israelis are going to be participating in this directly with the American administration in this attack, because Israel is behind this pushing, and it wouldn't really look great on the American president to be viewed as the person who is going for this war against Iran for the sake of Israel, and also without the consent of the American people. Now, we're hearing some demands. Some reports spoke about demands that are coming from the United States administration towards Iran, saying that they need to end the suppression of protests. They need to release all detainees arrested during the riots, the handover of 408 kilograms of enriched uranium, 0 uranium enrichment from now moving forward, the cessation of Iran's long-range ballistic missile program, and the halt to all support of Hezbollah, Ansarullah, and Hamas. Who does that serve? That serves the genocide state, the apartheid state of Israel. And these are the same demands that Donald Trump started to ask from Iran following the 12-day war in June, demands that were not there before the 12-day war in June. As a matter of fact, if we go back to the beginning of the year, Donald Trump himself was saying that there wouldn't be a problem even if they don't have an agreement with Iran. This is the same man who withdrew from the previous agreement the United States had with Iran following 2 years of negotiations between the Iranian and American administrations during the Obama period at the time. This all shows that, well, Donald Trump is very serious. I'm not sure if it's a coincidence that all of this escalation is coming following the release of a lot of information to do with Jeffrey Epstein and the pedophile network that he was running, extorting and blackmailing American politicians, at the same time operating a network of slavery that includes American girls for the sake of a foreign entity called Israel, with the help of the United States administration, or at least elements within the administration. It's quite a coincidence. And the fact that Donald Trump is putting forward an option to attack, saying help is coming, this proves that he is indeed serious. Now, all of that is talk. all of that is in the realm of statements and everything that they've been talking about. How likely are they to attack, and what kind of an attack are we actually talking about here exactly? Because Iran is already saying any attack that's going to come against us is going to potentially lead to a change in our doctrine from defensive to offensive, and any place that will be used to conduct an attack against us will be a legitimate target. Chances are, first and foremost, the United States military is incapable of conducting a large ground operation inside of Iran, but rather a limited airstrike against certain locations that would lead to more internal problems that they can push for inside of Iran with terror cells that they would send from outside of Iran through several borders with the help, of course, of Israel. The United States failed in so many countries militarily. They failed in Afghanistan after 2 decades against people who were far less equipped than Iran. When in the case of Iran, we're talking about advanced technology, serious strategic weapons that have hypersonic ballistic missiles, exo-atmospheric hypersonic missiles that bypass all of the advanced air defense systems of the United States and Israel, and most countries that tried to help Israel during the 12-day war. And the United States knows its limitations here. So it's most likely going to be restricted to an aerial offensive, an attack against certain targets within Iran, probably some more nuclear sites, probably what the United States views as factories to develop weapons in, maybe some locations they consider to be radars, for example. And the reason that I'm adding the first word in this is the fact that Iran operates a lot of dummy locations. For example, things to do with their radars. They've had a lot of dummy radars that Israel attacked and was boasting about, and the Iranians published images from the ground on how it was dummy radars that they attacked to mislead Israel and the United States in their operation. Israel might also conduct internal attacks. They're already active now, as confirmed by the United States administration and Israel, with Mossad cells and terror cells that they're supporting. That's what they consider to be, of course, protesters. Nothing to do with women's rights, right? Because if you're thinking about women's rights and the regime and what have you, we just recently had social media figure going to Iran and going shopping in Iran. Here she is. Her name is Syrian Girl. She's on X. She went to Iran. Is she wearing a headscarf? No. Are other women wearing headscarves? No. There was a woman, but I mean, not all of them are wearing headscarves, especially these two. And the woman behind them, the other one now. Why are they not getting shot by the Iranian police? I wonder why. Hold on a second. Most women in this video in Iran, in a shopping center, are not wearing headscarves. I thought the Iranian police shoots them. Lindsey Graham told us that if a girl is 16 years old and she's not wearing a headscarf,
that's all
she
propaganda.
gets shot. That doesn't appear to be the case. That's recent now, by the way. She said she just is in Iran now, by the way, and posting these videos. And the women in Iran seem fairly happy. They're wearing whatever they like. Some of them are wearing, the traditional Iranian clothing. And the ladies here are going and having fun. No problem whatsoever. So, just in case you thought it was about, liberating women, regardless of what you think of, clothing and what have you. Each one to their own. But it's not really what, Western leaders are telling us about Iran. And this whole facade of supporting the protesters, they just want to completely destroy the country so they can subjugate it to the will of the Zionists and the American administration inside of Iran. It's nothing to do with the Iranian people. It's to do with subjugating Iran as a state and controlling Iran as a state. The protests in Iran are these protests, the protests of the millions who went out yesterday in support of independent Iran, Iran of the resistance, and showing solidarity with its leadership. The others are rioting, and we still had more footage coming from Iran about these riots still taking place in some places, people burning, throwing Molotov cocktails and what have you, wreaking havoc. That's what's happening. Now, what they don't know, by the way, about an attack that may come against Iran is how Iran would respond. You see, before they started to escalate further, there were talks about a preemptive strike, and as a matter of fact, Israel was talking about Iran potentially carrying out a preemptive strike against it. One member of the Israeli government, Amichai Eliyahu, who was a member of the Jewish Power Party that is headed by Itamar Ben-Gvir, said that we are supporting the rioters inside of Iran so that we can potentially prevent a preemptive strike against us. So they know that very well. And if anything, this probably increases the appetite of Iran to carry out a preemptive strike at some point, so long as they have everything under the control and they take down the Western-backed thugs and rioters inside the country trying to have a change in the establishment and collapse Iran from within to replace the current establishment with a puppet regime led by Reza Pahlavi. Israel might also participate if the United States begins this attack, but they would not be able to know the boundaries of the Iranian response this time. Now, Iran showed its capabilities in June. However, what people need to understand very well is that these capabilities of Iran were limited. They did not exercise their full capabilities to all lengths. Iran has much more in its arsenal to hurt both Israel and the United States bases in the region very, very badly should they be attacked. And the chances are they will use that if they are attacked by both the United States and Israel to a level where they would continue their attacks to potentially reap more political gains to stop, rather than accept a ceasefire or agree not to attack so long as there is no attack against Iran, like what happened in June. Let's not forget that the way it stopped is that both Israel and the United States declared a ceasefire unilaterally. There was no agreement, there was nothing signed, there were no clauses, there was nothing there. It's because Israel started to beg to get to a ceasefire. Then the United States administration sent messages to Iran that Israel will stop its attacks from 4 a.m. and they would appreciate it if Iran would also stop. This might not be the case this time. This time we might see something different. And what is clearer than ever now is that the eyes of both the American administration, first and foremost, then of course Israel, are not headed towards de-escalation, but trying to subjugate more and more countries. You can talk, of course, and we can talk a lot about the Israeli influence and the Zionist lobby, but at the end of the day, it was the American administration who went to Venezuela and kidnapped Maduro in this theatrical thing. They probably bought to the majority of the people around him, not like this heroic theme that they're trying to portray. It's the United States that's threatening Canada and Nicaragua and Cuba and other Latin American countries and threatening to annex Greenland that belongs to Denmark, a NATO member. Of course, we can talk about Israel and Israeli or Zionist interests behind this, but it's the United States. So there is a bigger appetite here coming from Donald Trump and the US administration, which leads us to believe that things are going to reach to a point where they would have an attack. Again, it doesn't mean they're going to break all of the tools. It doesn't mean they're going to go fully all out on Iran, but it does mean that they are preparing something to try and have more leverage against Iran to submit to the demands of both Israel and the United States of America, and they're not hiding it. That's why they're reiterating now that Iran has to have certain things done if it wants more negotiation with the United States of America. Getting rid of their nuclear enriched uranium, getting rid of their ballistic missiles, getting rid of all of their capability to enrich uranium, and in essence, be a slave to Israel and the United States. And that's something that the Iranians are most likely not going to accept whatsoever. However, the Israelis and both them and the American administration are indeed preparing and are probably closer than ever to attack Iran.
The mainstream media is nearly unanimous in presenting the view of what's happening in the streets in many cities in Iran as a spontaneous uprising against a corrupt and incompetent government. In reality, who or what is behind this chaos?
Well, Judge, thank you very much for having me. It's always an honor. It began with a manipulation of the Iranian currency from abroad. Apparently the Americans, well, apparently not, the Americans put pressure on neighboring countries to block Iran's access to currency. So we had a sharp drop in the currency. I don't know exactly how much, 30, 40%. And that caused shopkeepers in some areas, in 2 or 3 areas, including Tehran, to protest because it makes it very difficult for them to trade and they could go bankrupt. And a couple of, I don't know how many people protested, but a few thousand, a couple of thousand, 3 or 4 places. There was no violence. There was no police interference. And it passed off peacefully. And the next day, they also went to the streets. Then we had, now I'm not great about dates, but then we had the infiltration of these rioters, and they started increasingly becoming violent and destroying property. But on Thursday night, it became really bad, and there was a lot of fighting, a lot of killing. The rioters killed a lot of people. 100 police officers, roughly, I don't know the exact numbers, but were killed, and a couple of hundred at least, Basij and guards, and also riot guards were killed as well, which makes it between 300 and 400 who were killed by the rioters and the terrorists. And they were shot with different types of guns. I also have a very close friend, my father being a physician. I have a very close friend who's been operating in one of the key hospitals. And he said most of his patients, they were killed with small arms, or sorry, injured or killed. Mostly injured because he operated on them, but a couple, or I don't know the number, maybe more, were killed. But most of the injuries, or most of those who were shot with pistols and from close range, which indicates that people were firing from within the crowd. And I know that in the United States, the anti-Iranian mood is, exploding. But these are the realities on the ground. We didn't have violence the first 2 days, no arrests, and then we have indication, clear indication that there was foreign interference. There's Mike Pompeo's tweet. There is the Persian message by Mossad to Iranians that they are on the ground. And also, I think just yesterday or a few hours ago, Channel 14 of Israel, they said that foreign states, meaning Israel and probably the United States, are funneling in weapons. And now people in the Western media denies what Israeli media is admitting. It's sort of like someone who's guilting the court of law. He's saying, I did it. And then the people around them saying, no, 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 he didn't do it. So this is the state of affairs. A lot of police officers were killed. A lot of innocent people were killed who had nothing to do with it. And a lot of rioters were killed. But it's not clear exactly how many, because since there was so much police activity and riots in different places, organized crime becomes more active because when there's a lot of police presence. So in some places there were deaths and it's not clear why they died. Or in other places, for example, when the police went away and rioters went to a marketplace, the marketplace, they brought in their own people. They paid people to protect them, and they get into fights, and then perhaps they were injured or killed. So they're still trying to figure out who was who and who killed what happened. But the fact that, let's say, between 300 to 400 people of the police and the Basij and the guards and the riot guards, these four groups, were killed, and I think roughly 100 police officers or officers of the law, that says a great deal. And especially coming from the attacks on Iran coming from the United States, which right now, a woman who was shot in the face by an ICE official, the argument is whether she was turning to the right enough for it not to be justified for him to shoot her in the face, or was it not enough and so he was justified to shoot her. That, I think, when the United States is having this sort of debate, and we have 100 police officers and overall 300 to 400 people who were killed by the rioters who were policing the Basij and the guards and the riot police, I think that's the criticism from the United States is seen here as a bit rich.
The case you referred to in Minneapolis, in my view, is a case of manslaughter, and the ICE officer should expect to be indicted by the state of Minnesota once the federal government, which has seized all the evidence, releases the evidence. But back to what you were just describing. You mentioned a tweet from a former CIA director and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Let's post it and I'll read it for the benefit of those who are taking us on audio only. This is from Mike Pompeo. The Iranian regime is in trouble. Bringing in mercenaries is its last best hope. Riots in dozens of cities and the something under siege. Mashhad, Tehran, Zahedan, next stop, Baluchistan. 47 years of this regime. POTUS 47. Coincidence? Happy New Year to every Iranian in the streets and also to every Mossad agent walking beside them. Why would Mike Pompeo have admitted what we in the West, who are rejecting the mainstream media narrative, have been saying for 2 weeks now?
Well, I think probably the Israelis, Mossad itself, and Pompeo, they've been boasting because they misread Iran. They think that Iran is a house of cards. They've been saying that for decades now. They're always saying, just give it a little push and it's finished. That's what they were doing during the 12-day war. They thought, okay, we'll attack Iran and it's going to be all over. And the exact opposite happened. And we had a discussion back then together too. So I think that he thought it would be over, and then afterwards, the glory would be given to Mossad. But that's not the case. these rioters were never with the rest of society. During the war, these people weren't with the absolute strong majority of people who were supporting the war effort. And now in the West, they're also trying to, on Monday, we had huge rallies across the country against the rioters and in support of the state and the constitution and the leader. And in Tehran, the estimates are between 2.3 million. I was there, to 3 million people, participants. And in cities across the country, huge numbers. Each city had its own. And now in the West, they're trying to say this is AI. Whereas Al Jazeera was there, Al Jazeera English was there, RT was there, CGTN, CCTP, Al Jazeera English and Arabic were there, Al Mayadi. Journalists were there from different, of course, they don't like RT or CCTV, but Al Jazeera, I mean, there are lots of people, and during the whole day, they were going, what do you call it in English? There was rolling coverage. It was all being broadcast live. And now they're trying to say, like, this is fake or this was old footage, whereas they showed the old footage and the two are not the same. So the point is that they're trying to negate reality. They want to believe their fantasies about Iran, and those fantasies always lead to miscalculation. 16 years ago, Farid Zakaria had me on CNN during the 2009 elections when there were also people on the streets protesting. And he said that you're a mouthpiece for a dying regime to me. Whereas I'm just telling it as it is. I wasn't in any of these administrations from 16 years ago till now. But it's been 16 years since I've been the mouthpiece of a dying regime. That's a very, very slow death.
Right. Our colleagues, Alistair Crook, and you know these folks, Jeff Sachs, Scott Ritter, have all said that the tide has turned dramatically in favor of massive supports for the government of Iran. It sounds like you would agree with that from what you observed and even participated in earlier this week.
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, the Americans do their own polls in Iran regularly from Turkey. And I know that they do that, and other people know. They call into Iran and they do polls all the time. They know that in Iran, the state has always had a high degree of legitimacy. But during this period when the riots became very violent and a lot of people, and they destroyed tens of public buses, many ambulances, tens of fire engines. They burned down a clinic and a young nurse inside burned alive. They burned many mosques, and inside one mosque, they trapped 2 young Basij members and kept throwing Molotov cocktails inside and burned them alive. They cut off people's heads. They smashed people's heads. People saw this in their own towns. Neighbors of mine or students of mine, they would go on the streets to watch, and then they'd see these things, or not necessarily my students seeing these, but people, my students saw fighting between like people on the street. They, just a few nights ago, they wanted to attack a mosque in Ashrafi Esfahani Street or somewhere near there. And then a neighbor of a close relative of mine, he was there, and he said that when they were going to attack the mosque, people on the streets attacked them. There were no police there. So the point is that even ordinary people are now angered. So you see that often you have these protests in support of the government or the state or the constitution, but now it's even greater because people feel threatened by these rioters. So the West can pretend that this is AI or it's fake, but the reality on the ground is that what the Israeli and the Mossad and the CIA and others have done is they've united people again together, just like they did during the 12-day war. And one other thing that I should point out is that it's been quiet for the last 3-4 nights and days. We've had no problem at all. And nothing's happening now. When they pulled the plug on the internet, I think on early Friday morning, immediately the riots began to go downhill, and on Saturday they were literally almost finished. Why? Because they no longer had contact with their group leaders abroad. There were teams in different parts of Tehran and different cities, and then finally, suddenly, when they lost communication, they couldn't continue for many more hours. And so the whole thing quickly, within 24 hours, let's say 36 hours, again, I'm not good with time, it collapsed. Why? So they were using the internet because they were coordinating. This was not spontaneous. These are narratives that Western pundits and Western media are just repeating because that's what they want to believe.
When President Trump says that help is on the way, how does the Iranian government interpret a statement like that?
Well, that's another thing, Judge. Does anyone in their right mind think that ordinary Iranians support the Israeli regime and Trump? And when Netanyahu is supporting or Trump is supporting the rioters, like the rioters, ordinary Iranians would look upon that favorably after the United States bombed Iran and the Europeans all supported the airstrikes. I mean, these people are living, Western pundits and Western leaders and Western politicians are living in fantasy land. The ordinary Iranians do not like them. They dislike them. They despise them. Now, what is Trump trying to do? It's unclear because Trump is Trump. But it is what the Iranians are thinking is that Trump may carry out a major attack on Iran. He may carry out a minor attack on Iran, and he may not do anything. But what they are preparing for is for a major attack and war. And the Iranians are going to hit back very hard, and they've been preparing themselves for this. But again, no one knows what Trump really wants to do, but many believe that this whole operation was to push the country towards war. It began with the sudden currency manipulation, then there were these protests, and then you had the rioters infiltrate, and then the whole Western media and then you have politicians from AOC, a so-called progressive, to Trump, all of them saying we have to help the Iranian people. So the belief here is that the currency fall and the subsequent events were all intended from the very beginning to push us towards war.
Right. Here's President Trump yesterday. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but we're going to play it for the benefit of the audience. Basically saying to the protesters, keep protesting, take over your institutions, save the names of the killers and abusers that are abusing you. I don't know how bad it is. I keep hearing bad numbers, and those who are harming you will pay a very big price. I mean, this is so generalized. It's hard to know what he's talking about. He must know that his own CIA has been fomenting this. But let me play the clip, and then you can respond. Chris, number 5.
And by the way, to all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible, and save the name of the killers and the abusers that are abusing you. You're being very badly abused. If the numbers are right now, I hear 5 different sets of numbers. I hear numbers. Look, 1 death is too much, but I hear much lower numbers, and then I hear much higher numbers. But I say save their names because they'll pay a very big price. And I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran. Just went into effect today. And I say, make Iran great again. You know, it was a great country until these monsters came in and took it over.
Can you imagine if President Pezeshkian went on international television and said to the people in Minneapolis, keep demonstrating and pull the masks off the faces of those police who are abusing you? Again, the statement was very generalized, but the conundrum is, what does he mean by help is on the way? Nobody knows. Is the Iranian regime, I shouldn't say regime, I'm falling into the language of the Western media. Is the Iranian government prepared for what is likely to come from the United States and Israel? would the Iranian government not consider a preemptive strike? As Franklin Delano Roosevelt used to say, if the rattlesnake is about to bite you, shouldn't you crush its head before it sinks its teeth into you?
Well, Judge, a couple of things. One is that it's not really clear what information he is being fed. He is dishonest quite often. I mean, right here we saw him say, "I'm not talking to Iranian officials." There are no negotiations taking place, and the Iranians are not going to negotiate as long as the United States has preconditions over the nuclear program or the missile defense capabilities. That's just not going to happen. So he's speaking as if the Iranians asked him to talk and he's not going to talk, which is not true. But also a few days ago, and this is I'd like to really hear what your other guests have to say about this. When Trump said the city of Mashhad, which is like a city of, I don't know, 3 million people, it's fallen. A town, a village in this country didn't fall for 5 minutes. But I don't know where he gets this from. So are they giving him misinformation, or is he just looking on the internet, seeing these pundits saying all sorts of nonsense, like the fact that they're saying 10,000 people died, 2,000 people, 20, it's going up. I think within a couple of days we'll get to a few million deaths, the way the pundits are pushing it. And they're pretending as if the riots are going on. And as I said, they've been over for the last few days. But I think that no one here knows what will happen, as I said before, but the Iranians are preparing for the worst.
Okay.
And the Iranians have stated, alluding to the point you made, that an assault by the Iranians is possible, in that the Iranians may not wait for the Americans or the Israelis to attack. If they feel that there's an imminent threat, they may strike. And that makes the situation even more dangerous, because if Trump does something provocative without actually attacking Iran, that could be interpreted as an attack, and then Iran could launch missiles all over the place. So it's sort of like what's going on between the United States and the Russians. They're playing, the U.S. government is playing a game where some misunderstanding could create catastrophic consequences. But the Iranian defense capabilities are quite formidable, very formidable. And the Persian Gulf is very vulnerable. And if there is war, there won't be any oil from Iraq, the Caucasus, the Persian Gulf, and that will lead to global economic meltdown. They can pretend that they can win over Iran easily, but I think they will see economic collapse very swiftly.
With the exception of the shutdown internet, is life returning to normal? Are you able to lecture to your students? Are students able to go to school? Can you go to shops? Can you go to mosque? Can you travel from A to B?
Yes, classes are over. Last week was my last week of classes. This is reading week, and next week we have exams. The University of Tehran says our exams have to be on campus. That's what they're saying now. But yes, I was in this studio. I was in this. Well, this is not a studio, but this is Press TV. I was in this building last night till late. I went home late. I drove here. I went to the funeral. That was 100 officers of the law. Today they had a mass funeral in Tehran. I went there, but I couldn't make it because I was afraid I'd miss your program. So I went halfway there and came over here.
Yeah.
So I've been traveling around Tehran today, last night, the day before. It's very quiet. The war, all this stuff right now is just online. And by the way, the reason why they continue to leave the internet cut is one major reason is because Trump spoke of a cyber attack, and another is that if the United States strikes, the Iranians know that the Americans get most of their information from they get it from the internet, or they use digital means to obtain intelligence. So right now it's both it's for multiple purposes, but gradually they say that they're going to lift the restrictions. Right now we can use Iranian websites, and Iranian apps are increasingly becoming available, and then gradually they're going to open up the rest. But it is difficult because businesses have serious difficulties. I cannot communicate with my students in group chats anymore. So there are significant difficulties.
Professor Morandi, thank you very much. Thank you for your personal courage, for your intellectual honesty, and for changing your schedule so as to be on with us. You and I may be together soon. I won't say when and where, but I look forward to it. You know I do. And God be with you. Thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you, Judge. It's always an honor.
Thank you. And a great opportunity to hear firsthand the view of an American born in the United States, but an Iranian and a professor at the University of Tehran, a highly regarded, brilliant, and gifted academic. Coming up at 2 o'clock this afternoon on More of This, Max Blumenthal, and at 3 o'clock, Phil Giraldi, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.
For a war in Iran. Of course, here's Israel First, Mark Levin. I'm convinced the president will act decisively and strongly and militarily, as he has threatened for days, because he knows what we all know. That is, if the regime survives, it will be the greatest missed opportunity against terrorism and an avowed terror state ever. Diplomacy and negotiations are ridiculous words in the context of what's happening in Iran and what's happening to those brave people. Tell that to the vice president, who is trying to push the administration towards a diplomatic solution to any of this. But okay, so he is, I guess, a lunatic. Here's Laura Loomer. Bomb the Ayatollah, in all caps. This is like apparently what she dreams about every night. So of course,
you not supposed to condone violence on X? I would be afraid that would get me kicked off, but I guess there's certain people you can condone
you can
towards.
if you're Israel for it, you can absolutely say that, but you can't say anything else. Like, see that you know how this rolls now, of course.
Well, that was YouTube had even it's in their policy that you're allowed to say that you can kill Palestinians because they're the Hamas is terrorists. So you could say kill Hamas, but you can't say anything about Israel. It's literally like in their rules that you're allowed to do it.
Gotcha.
Yep. We are living, of course, in a clown world, a free speech clown world. Anyway, so of course this is coming. Netanyahu, of course, just visited the White House recently, asked Trump to carry out a new round of attacks on Iran. Usually when he shows up a few days later, this happens. I've spoken to sources in Israel, former IDF, who've told me that they believe it's either going to happen Friday into Saturday or the following Friday into Saturday. That is on the Israeli side that we have. And the president just spoke a few moments ago on this very subject. Listen.
To all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible, and save the name of the killers and the abusers that are abusing you. You're being very badly abused. If the numbers are right now, I hear 5 different sets of numbers. I hear numbers. Look, 1 death is too much. But I hear much lower numbers, and then I hear much higher numbers. But I say save their names because they'll pay a very big price. Then I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran. Just went into effect today. And I say, make Iran great again. You know, it was a great country until these monsters came in and took it over.
Who, us?
The CIA had nothing to do with that, of course.
Us?
Okay.
We did that.
All right. Oh my God. By the way, the numbers thing. This is, you see like people like Mark Levin throwing around numbers that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Our sources yesterday confirmed the numbers that we reported here yesterday on the show. 2,150 dead. This was as of 2 days ago, 480 injured, 620 missing across 11 cities in Iran. Now, you've heard numbers from the CIA and Mossad pushing out 300,000 dead. Then you have like Mark Levin pushing out tens of thousands of people. Okay, So those are the numbers from about 48 hours ago, and we'll get you updated numbers as we get them from our sources. Anyway, we want to bring in Dave DeCamp now, who is the editor over at antiwar.com, one of our favorite websites. It's very rare because, I mean, there's so many warmongers right now that desperately want war, and they'll try to spin it any way they can. They're trying to tell us, Dave, that it's about human rights. We got to protect the protesters, and then we're going to sanction them to death so they don't have food. They don't. I mean, I don't know what the. Now it's about nuclear. It's also about nuclear weapons. It's
what
about
is love, Dave? When you love the Iranian people, how do you express that? You bomb them, you starve them. Is this just tough?
You take away their power, their electricity.
What are they trying to sell us here?
Anyway,
what do you
sorry.
think?
Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me back. It's good to talk to you guys. And so I think it's important for people to understand, which I'm sure your viewers do, is that Israel is really pushing for another attack on Iran. They want Trump to do it or Trump to back them. And right now, I mean, if you go on X, we're being just hit with so much propaganda about what's happening inside Iran that it's very difficult to understand exactly what is happening. And these people claiming, as you said, the numbers, you know, kind of these astronomical numbers, and you just see it spread like wildfire. It's very clear that this propaganda is being pushed because they want a war. President Trump has said, and he's been saying this for a few weeks now, that he would attack Iran if they killed protesters. And I believe, based on what we've seen from Israel, that he probably told that maybe to Netanyahu or Israeli officials privately before he first said that publicly, which is why I think is part of the reason why we saw a Mossad X account at the end of December. But when these protests first started and they were relatively calm, we saw this Mossad X account in Farsi say that they have, you know, agents among the protesters. It seemed like they were trying to stoke a crackdown from Iranian authorities. And one thing that we do know, both from Iranian government sources and NGOs that are, you know, backed by the West, that at least over 100 Iranian law enforcement and military personnel have been killed. That's a significant number. That means that there is, you know, attacks on them, armed attacks against them. Of course, I'm sure there's also a crackdown on unarmed protesters as well. But it's certainly just not the picture that we're being shown in Western media. And again, on X, I mean, man, you go on there and it's just people just pumping all this stuff out.
Oh, it's fake videos from Greece. Like you see like videos, you know, I mean, it's just like people sharing all sorts of fake videos or whatever it is to further their own narrative.
Videos from previous protests about women removing their hijab. We've seen that years ago, but people don't know this. So, you know, some of the conversation, I've seen people taking Glenn Greenwald to task, and you don't do that in my presence, saying, oh, you just don't care about Iranians. They really do want this. How the hell can we know the will of the Iranian people, or that we should solve it? This is where this conversation hangs in the balance.
Right.
So, yeah. And how is the U.S. going to solve this?
They're
just going to start bombing Iran? You know, even
Dave, that's always the best way to solve it. We have a long history of regime change operations. I mean, let's look at Libya. Libya is a shining example of how great things are there now after we bayoneted and sodomized him with a sword. Muammar Gaddafi, or Iraq. I mean, look how great Iraq is, or Afghanistan. I mean, the laundry list is, I mean, it's a long list right now. So whenever we want to solve something, the best thing for us to do is bomb them. That's how you help people.
Please do respond to that. This idea that, like, well, we need to save them. They really do want this. Can you respond to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that these protests started over the economic situation in Iran. And since the first Trump administration, since he quit the Iran nuclear deal, the U.S. policy has been what they call maximum pressure, which essentially, you know, the idea of it, what Mike Pompeo said at the time, was to destroy the Iranian economy and hurt the Iranian people. So then they would rise up against the government. So the U.S. strategy has been to impose economic harm on the people of Iran. So I would say, if you really want the U.S. to help Iran, the right thing to do would be to lift those sanctions and not be involved. And I mean, you know, you see what Trump is saying there, telling them to seize the institutions. Look at what the Iranian government is saying, you know, all their official media and everything is saying that this is all being orchestrated by the US and Israel, which of course there's certainly some truth to that, but there's also real grievances. But if you have the president of the United States telling them, you know, ordering them to take over the government and continue the protests, that's just giving the government kind of more of an excuse to crack down. And also Trump, you know, he said that he's going to impose these tariffs now. So if that's true, if he actually enforces that, you never really know with these tariffs if they're actually going to be enforced, and say that impacts certain countries trading with Iran, that could just hurt the Iranian economy and the people more. So, you know, it just does not seem to be the best idea. And again, just the idea here that it's the US's job to help the Iranian people, when, as you mentioned, you look at our track record in the region and you look at what the US has been helping Israel do for the past 2 years, I would say there's probably a better candidate for helping the Iranian people than the US.
And I mean, I don't mean to be like glib or anything. I just come from the America First position on this, which is our country is crumbling. And, you know, you see like the people sharing like photos. They're like, hey, Greenland, do you want this? And it's like shows all these homeless encampments across California. And, you know, like this is what so we have a lot of problems here in the United States. And I don't understand how the narrative is that we can somehow help them, that it's our job to help them. Like, would we want, amid protests in the United States about our own government or about President Biden, we would want the Iranian government here with tens of thousands of people involving themselves in our government or our way of living? I don't want Israel telling me what it's like in my community or what I should expect from my government. F off.
Yeah, and that's something people need to understand. You know, even if, say, you know, you were opposed to your government, say during the Biden administration, you thought the 2020 election was rigged and you wanted him out, would you have supported China or Russia coming in and taking Biden out?
Right.
You know,
Right.
people are instinctively against foreign intervention.
Yeah.
So again, it just, we're getting this picture. You know, I see like this report on Fox News. The reporter's like, oh, my source in Iran tells me all the Iranian protesters love Trump. They're so happy with what he's doing. They want him to do more. It's like, really? Is that what they're saying in Iran right now?
No,
It's
and then
just
you have
really-
Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone reporting today, showing other, you know, on the street protesters saying the exact opposite of that. But you're never going to see that on Fox News. So there's a massive media propaganda campaign working right now, is there not?
Yeah, there certainly is. It's massive. I mean, I think they're throwing all of their psyop chips into this right now, because from Israel's perspective, I mean, the things we've talked about before, they know that their time is running out in the US, that they're losing support, and they might view this administration as kind of the last shot for the big war with Iran. And, you know, again, from an America First perspective, what is going to be the consequences if the US does start bombing Iran? The Iranians have said that they're going to hit US bases, US ships in the region in response. The last time, during what we now call the 12-day war, they really choreographed it and gave the US a warning before they attacked that base in Qatar. But I think, you know, we have reason to believe that this time they're not going to give warning. And again, there's so much kind of psyop happening. It's hard to give credit to these reports, but I've seen reports of that Iran has warned Gulf countries in the region that house U.S. bases, that if the U.S. attacks them, they're going to strike U.S. bases without warning. Again, we don't know exactly how credible these reports are. Also, there's also reports that the U.S. has warned their Gulf allies that they are going to bomb Iran. So, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the coming days, but I mean, if we're going to take President Trump at his word, I mean, he said that he's going to hit him if, so it seems like there's a real chance of something happening here. And if there's a lot of American casualties that Americans could get killed, and that's probably just going to drag the U.S. even further into it.
Now, something I put on X is, we're really worried about the lives of Iranian protesters who are protesting their governments. What about the lives of Israeli protesters who are protesting the Netanyahu government or protesting what's happening in the West Bank? No, them. We don't care about them. Absolutely not. No, double standard. Now, I just think it's worth remembering the psyops that the Pentagon has been running on Iran For decades, you probably recall in 2022, there was a bombshell report in the Washington Post about the Stanford report that detailed the level of psyops that the Pentagon was running inside Iran on social media. So it was as benign as here's a recipe, and then also overthrow the Ayatollah. That was also happening in Afghanistan and other places. We know this. So we know that this has continued. All Lloyd Austin said at the time was, we'll look into that. Maybe we should stop it. But we have no reason to believe that it ever stopped. We saw Israel doing it in open social media with Netanyahu and his clean glasses of water. Iranians, you can have this too. So we cannot excuse ourselves from stoking this. We just can't really know how potent the ingredient has been, right?
Yeah. And I mean, just a few months ago, I don't know if you've noticed, but the son of the Shah has been all over the place.
Yes.
Apparently, he met with Steve Witkoff. That's according to Axios to Barak Ravid. So I haven't seen confirmation beyond that. But he's really getting shoved down our throats. And there was reporting from Haaretz a few months ago that Israel was pushing him. That's why we were seeing him everywhere. Yeah. And he's really, and there's claims that people have been chanting for him in the streets in Iran. And there's been videos that purport to show that. But again, this stuff, I just find this all very hard to believe that that's someone who Iranians want to fly in, someone who hasn't lived there in decades, want to fly in and put into power. Right. See, we're getting hit at all angles, I think, here.
Yeah.
Well, we know the CIA with their... Go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of Americans, people are aware of that at this point. But they're really laying it on thick right now with the propaganda.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we just saw yesterday the report from Israel, I think from Smotrich, saying they're going to, now it's $1.5 billion they're devoting to Hasbara to push out propaganda. That's part of their new budget, $1.5 billion. I mean, they're like saying it out in the open, like, here you go.
I wonder if there's anyone who didn't buy Ukraine, didn't buy Venezuela, didn't buy Yemen, but then they're like, yes, Iran, this one's different. Who is that archetype? I mean, we don't know. Yeah, raise your hand in the chat.
Welcome back to the resolution saying the president couldn't go to war in Venezuela without their permission. I think it's high time they pass a war powers resolution to preempt anything this president might be doing. We don't need carriers. This will be a cruise missile. This will be a B-2 bomber. F-22, F-35 type strike. So the lack of aircraft carriers doesn't surprise me. In fact, it makes sense because if we are dumb enough to attack, and I'll get to that in a second, any aircraft carriers in the area would be sunk. The Iranians have the ability to reach out and touch with ballistic missiles that can't be shot down. And so there's no reason for them to put these assets in place. The other thing that's going to happen, though, is that the American facilities in the region are going to get waxed. It's just preordained. And there's nothing we can do to stop it, which leaves the question, why are we doing this? The Israelis have always hinted that they had something else up their sleeves. When they did the whole drone thing, that was a huge network, took decades to install, and it was rolled up. It's dead. But the Israelis were like, we got something else. Well, they just shot that bolt. Well, that something else was they had, the Israelis had created the ability to mobilize significant anti-demonstration riots. Now, what the Israelis were hoping is that they would pull the trigger on the riots, and while the riots reached their peak, the United States would bomb, command and control, leadership targets, basically decapitate the regime or neutralize the regime, neutralize security, and create the conditions for this unrest to spill over and become regime change worthy. That's done. That's finished. I don't care what you read on social media. The revolution is over. The Iranians have won. They've rolled it up. The Israelis shot their bolt, and the United States is too late to the game. So I think right now there's a lot of posturing by Trump to try and intimidate Iran to the negotiating table, but I don't think the Iranians are going to take that bait. Look, we have a madman in office, and there's no way that you can apply logic to the methodologies there, but he missed his opportunity. The window of strike, and you just listen to the rhetoric of Lindsey Graham and all the other people that are plugged into the Israelis. They're like, strike now, baby, strike now, baby, strike now, baby. Do it. Help these poor people in the streets. Well, Trump didn't strike. And the Israeli card has been played, and the Iranians trumped it. So I hesitate to say anything, but I'm not putting money on the United States bombing Iran anytime soon. At least not the attack that Trump is talking about is a regime change attack. It's an attack to kill Khomeini, kill Pezeshkian, to kill the Republican Guard, a similar attack that the Israelis did in June 12th. But the Iranians aren't asleep at the wheel this time. I think you'll find that their leadership is buried in bunkers, scattered, with plans in place for, redundancy. And the other thing is their ballistic missile forces now are fully mobilized and ready to strike. And these are the good stuff. They used all the bad stuff earlier. They got the good stuff now. And the good stuff will come down day one. And it will take Israel off the map, and it'll take American facilities off the map, and thousands of Americans will die. And Donald Trump will have to live with that legacy. And I hope that Tulsi Gabbard, who was cut out of Venezuela, is sending him repeated memos saying, don't do this. We'll see.
Yeah, well, Ray, I want to kick it to you, but let me first play what Donald Trump said exactly in the lead up to this strike threat.
Business went through the roof.
You said to Iran this morning that help is on the way for protesters. What did you mean by that? What kind of help?
You're going to have to figure that one out. I'm sorry.
How many people have been killed in Iran?
Nobody's been able to give me an accurate number. I have heard numbers from everything's a lot. One is a lot. But I've heard numbers much lower, and I've heard numbers much higher. We'll be.
So, Ray, that's what Donald Trump is saying. And so anything that you want to respond to with regard to what Scott said and Trump's, threats of a strike?
Well, it may be not very sensible to put any trust in our professional military, but I wonder if they want to see their bases decimated. I just wonder if they'll go the 10th mile, so to speak, for Israel. I guess it's worth reminding people this has nothing to do with U.S. national security. Iran is no threat to the United States, never has been. This is all for Israel. Now, it all depends on whether Trump is so wedded to Netanyahu, not only for genocide, my God, not only for forced starvation, but for sacrificing U.S. troops as well as other troops in a fool's errand. They tried it before. They can't even justify it by the so-called existence of a nuclear weapon. There isn't any. They're not working on a nuclear weapon. And when Tulsi Gabbard said that, she got hit on the cheek there, saying, you don't say that anymore, and got marginalized. So I hope Scott is, I hope similarly to Scott, that she'll be able to weigh in here. And I'm relieved to hear Scott say, and I've felt for some time, more hope than maybe hope being father to the thought that the U.S. would, that however mercurial or unpredictable Trump is, that the U.S. military would tell him, look, we're going to have these kinds of losses. And, there's a good chance that Israel will be, what should I use? What word? Oh, obliterated. Like Israel and Netanyahu obliterated, and their only last chance in extremis is, you know what, Mr. President, a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, and Scott, the Gulf countries, they are warning, especially Saudi Arabia is warning the Trump administration to not strike Iran because of the possible retaliation. Is Saudi Arabia right to do this? Is there a possibility here that the United States could strike Iran and not suffer consequences, because Iran has said that they will and they are prepared for a war, and they're preparing for war with the United States, especially in mind. What's your thoughts about this?
Again, this isn't Iran's first rodeo. They fought a 12-day war back in June. They're fully cognizant of everything. They have a very capable intelligence service. One of the things about the 12-day war is that it removed uncertainties from the equation. Prior to the 12-day war, would the United States pull the trigger? Would Israel pull the trigger? Would it be a big strike, a little strike? What questions asked and answered? Israel tried to assassinate the Iranian leadership with the assistance of the United States. And for 12 days, Israel attempted to pound Iran into the Stone Age. Unfortunately, Iran had a counterpunch, and the Israelis ended up having to call it quits and beg the United States to intervene. And that's why the war stopped. But there's no more questions. I mean, I can't imagine an Iranian intelligence officer getting up in front of his command and giving out courses of action that's, start with the premise, we're uncertain what the United States and Israel seek to achieve here. And we don't know that if they initiated military action, it would be a decisive blow or would it be hybrid warfare? No, he'd be fired on the spot. You have to come in and say, we know exactly what they're going to do. It's a decapitation strike that's designed to empower the protesters. Now, we've crushed the protesters, but be prepared for a decapitation strike across the board. We need to be ready for this, and we need to be ready to launch on warning. We can't just be sitting ducks. They'll be coming after our launchers. So the moment we get an indication aircraft are in the air, we need to launch, and we need to launch everything. What we don't launch will be at risk. I mean, these are the kind of things, the factors that go into military planning that are no longer in question, in doubt. And so I think the Iranians are very professional. They understand the region. They understand what's at stake here. And time is not on their side. They need to knock Israel out of the fight up front, and they need to give the United States the biggest possible bloody nose there is, in hopes that the United States takes a step back and says, we don't want to continue this. So we'll see. Again, this is all speculation here, but from a professional standpoint, I just can't imagine an intelligence officer giving a briefing to the Iranian command that didn't list options 1, 2, and 3 as the same. They're going to blow us away, so we need to blow them away sooner.
Yeah, and Ray, we have the president of the United States right now openly calling for regime change and openly supporting forces of regime change. This is what he put on his Truth Social. Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions, save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I've canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way. MAGA, President Donald Trump. Ray, your thoughts on this situation as it is cascading and really descending into something quite ugly?
Is MAGA make Iran great again? Is that what MAGA stands for?
It could be, but there's another state that starts with an I, Israel. Anyway, but that's that's neither here nor there. But yes, I think he is actually referring to Iran here.
This is juvenile stuff. The problem is that it is Trump, and he is the president of the United States, and he does have his fingers on the nuclear codes. My God. That's why everyone from Putin to Xi and other sensible people try not to enrage him, try not to give him any chance to retaliate against them. Now, to predict what he's going to do is sort of a difficult chore because he is by definition unpredictable. But the Iranians have made it very clear that they're prepared, and I think Scott is quite right. If Trump prevails and he gets this General Dan, what is it? The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Raising Cane.
Yeah, Dan Kane.
Oh, Raising
Raising
Cane.
Kane. If he gets Kane, I've watched Kane now. I mean, he's very glib and he knows exactly politically how to act. But in terms of the commander that you need, in terms right now, that will be able to say, Mr. President, this is crazy. We're going to lose this many troops. I don't know if he's that kind of guy. So that's all I'll say on that. It's come to a head, but let's hope, let's expect that someone will raise the issues and say, look, Mr. Trump, this is really a bad idea. Venezuela, well, bad idea, but this is a really, really bad idea.
All right. I mean, we just got into 2026. Donald Trump, the United States, conducted that war crime, the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro. Now we are here, Scott. We are here talking about the threat and the preparations the U.S. is making toward an attack on Iran. And U.S. CENTCOM came out today, as of January 13th, talking about this new air defense operations cell in Qatar, talking about how U.S. and regional partners opened a new coordination cell at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar to enhance integrated air and missile defenses on January 12th. Scott, what does this mean? And how much does this have to do with these preparations with Iran, do you think?
I think it has everything to do with the preparations with Iran. It's posturing. Let's just be honest. Air defense capability is the air defense capability that you have, the technology. No amount of operation cells and coordination and, integrated this, integrated that is going to change the fact that we don't have air defense systems capable of protecting our facilities from concerted Iranian ballistic missile attack. We can weave together THAAD, Patriot 3, we can weave in Aegis, and it won't work. People need to understand that the Iranians have operationally an Oreshnik type missile. It's not the Oreshnik. The Russians certainly didn't give it to the Iranians, but the Iranians, people who study the Oreshnik and the hazelnut aspect of it are rods from God. It's not the first time people have been talking about rods from God. And, the Iranians are fully aware of this technology and they are very smart. They are certainly able to replicate the exotic ceramics that go into, making these things, the materials. My point is that this is purely posturing. This is designed to assuage the fears of the Gulf Arab states up until the moment. Remember, the Trump administration can't be trusted on anything. They're liars, straight up liars. Can't be trusted on anything. And so what the Trump administration does is deceive people up until the last minute. Like Iran, for instance, we're willing to have negotiations. Why don't you think about it over the weekend? We'll get together Monday. Oh, I'm sorry. Did Israel attack you Friday night? Too bad. Hamas, hey, we want to have negotiations about what's going on over there in Gaza. Why don't you all come to Qatar and we'll talk about it? And then, of course, they let the Israelis try to kill them. Vladimir Putin, hey, buddy, we're talking to you about Zelensky. I got Zelensky here. Hey, thanks for calling. Can you hold on the line for an hour? I'm going to go pass on this. I'll get right back to you. Don't move. And then they fire 91 drones, try and take him out. Nobody trusts the United States anymore. This is not a serious thing. First of all, with planning, you don't get together and have a master plan right off the bat. People get together, they talk, they come up with ideas. Those ideas then have to be turned into reality, meaning you have to put assets on the ground that link up. There has to be training involved, coordination. logistics sustainability, command and control procedures, sharing of classified information. All this stuff goes in. It doesn't happen overnight. So for all the people out there saying Trump's going to attack Iran tonight, that means that whatever they're doing in Al-Udeid is meaningless. Because A, they don't have the assets, but B, even if they did, they don't have time to actually turn it into something that can manifest itself realistically on the ground. So this is just posturing on the part of the Trump administration. It's meaningless. Trump can't be trusted. The United States can't be trusted. It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, and Ray, do you buy that, there's this narrative that JD Vance is pushing for diplomatic talks with Iran throughout all of this? But as Scott just said, the Trump administration has been using the word diplomacy, the so-called active diplomacy, as a weapon. Do you buy that this is the case right now?
That's an easy one. No. What I don't buy is the notion that JD Vance or anybody else is working behind the scenes. This all comes from our media, from Washington Post, the CIA asset, which is called the New York Times. You can't believe anything you read there. So no, I don't know if there's any stock to be put into what JD Vance said, given the fact that he lies about internal things too. Saying that women in Minnesota deserve to be, or whatever he said about it, was just awful.
Yeah. Well, maybe Scott, you can elaborate on the context here, because we just had the Trump administration conduct this illegal operation to kidnap Nicolas Maduro, claiming victory in Venezuela and total control, even joking about how Trump is the head of state in Venezuela. But now suddenly we're here talking about an attack on Iran as these so-called riots, these so-called protests, as you call them, these riots, have, according to Israeli and U.S. Western media sources, they're still happening. They're still big. And the Trump administration is saying they support them. But many are saying that they've actually, as you said, died out. So what is the context here? Why is the Trump administration in this seemingly chaotic foreign policy situation now diving deep into the Iran morass?
Well, I don't think Iran was on their radar, to be honest. Excuse me, I just have to get a shout out to Berg Sprangari. Scott Ritter is an idiot. Thanks, buddy. Just take that with a grain of salt as I respond. But my dogs actually concur with me. They think I'm an idiot as well. And they're probably more correct than you are. But the point is, after Venezuela, Trump said that Greenland is on our front burner. The invasion and occupation of Greenland, we're going to take this over, Fortress America, and all this. But Bibi has his own plans. And I think, the Mossad has been, when you prepare something like what's been ongoing, and let there be no doubt, this is a 100% Mossad operation heavily supported by the CIA. But the Mossad has spent decades cultivating these ties through the MEK, through the Shah's son in exile, through Kurdish groups, through the Baluch, through the Azeris. One of the largest Israeli Mossad intelligence stations in the world is in Azerbaijan. Why? Well, because they're going across the border into Iran to work up those Azeris. The Israelis are everywhere. And, so they've been working on this, building up these assets, building up these cells, because these operate in cellular fashion, training them on communications, training them on operations. And, the cells, what my take on just reading in between the lines here is that you had cellular structure, meaning that you had significant assets on the ground whose job is similar to that of a special forces team, meaning that they are there, and when the time comes, they will train an indigenous capability to act on them. And they rapidly expanded their forces, and they gave them, modern communications. And there's some interesting things there. The Iranians, when they started grabbing the phones of all these people, found the same message from a Farsi-speaking woman, um, Israeli, instructing on them on what to do if captured. What you need to say to protect yourself, protect the system, and all this stuff. They found Starlink, receivers. The Russians gave them the secret to Starlink, with Russia has figured out, of course, fighting Ukraine, and the Iranians were able to jam and shut down, intercept, track, reverse engineer Starlink, and these cells were all rounded up, and they're gone. I love how people are so desperate now that it's just a huge bot farm out there, trolls who just spread the same message. It's not because they're getting truth from Iran. They're being directed by the Mossad via MI6 Benjamin Netanyahu is bragging about, I think, Project Esther, he called it. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm on the wrong side. $7,000 a tweet. I could have had a great Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm basically it seems like I have to pay money to tweet. But the Israelis were funny, and they're increasing their budget. But the point is, the Israelis are managing right now a PR campaign because they have no contact with their assets. They're all dead. They're all captured. Tomorrow they're going to be hung by the neck until dead. It's going to be the greatest mass execution of traitors since what the Soviets did to the Nazis in Kiev in 1946. I look forward to it. I'm sorry, Ray. I know you're a good Christian, and Danny, you don't promote violence. Hang them by the neck until dead. These are Mossad thugs who burned a 3-year-old child to death and created violence that killed many, many innocent people. These aren't innocent activists. Some of them may have been sucked in, but they all knew what the hell they were doing. They were all taking direction from, people that are working directly for the Israelis. And the Israelis have their number. The Iranians have their number. They rolled them up. And also let's just talk about these deaths. 12,000 people supposed to die over the course of 2 or 3 days.
Scott, Barry Weiss is saying 20,000. The number just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Continue.
Getting bigger. Modern combat. Do you understand how many live rounds and machine guns and bombs and aircraft would have to be employed to generate that kind of death count? We're talking about full-scale war. The bloodiest day in Vietnam didn't come anywhere close to that. Hell, the Battle of the Bulge, you didn't kill that many Americans. And the Germans are coming in with aircraft, tanks, bombs, machine guns, infantry, assault, the whole thing. And now we're told, no, the Iranian security forces are just gunning them down in the streets, 12 to 20,000. It's 100% crap. Excuse my language. Maybe hundreds. I don't know. The Iranians apparently lost their, the Iranians are very restrained. What do you mean restrained, Scott? They're one of the most brutal police. The Iranian government actually loves the Iranian people. And the Iranian president is actually very sympathetic to opposition forces, legitimate opposition forces who voice concern about economic conditions. Hell, this guy took the hijab away. I don't know if everybody woke up to this fact, but you walk around Tehran today and the women ain't wearing the hijab. There's no cops around beating them up because the Iranian president said, we have to adjust to the times. And so, this whole thing, the whole thing about that woman, burning the portrait and smoking, she's Canadian, it was done in 2022. It's all a lie anyways, because there's no protest about taking off that job. It's already off. The Iranian government already conceded on this one. And they've conceded on a whole bunch of other things. Unfortunately, through those concessions, they create a window of vulnerability because then a fifth column can be, extrapolated from this newly energized mass of people. You can say, but it could get better if you get rid of them. That's what the Israelis did, passed out money, promises, the whole thing. They recruited a whole bunch of people. These are traitors. They committed treason. Again, I'm just all you good, warm, hot-blooded Americans out there. What would you want done to Americans who worked with, I don't know, pick the worst country in the world out there, Israel, Oh, wait, whoops, we can't say that. Worked with a hostile country to the United States, not to just collect information, but to come to the streets, burn down your police stations, burn down your fire departments, murder your women, murder your children, rampage through, basically declare war on your country. And now you caught them and you got them dead to rights. There ain't no ifs, ands, or buts about this. They got the instructions right there. They got the orders, how they implemented it. They got the cache of weapons. They got everything. What would you do, America? You'd say string them up by the neck until dead. Now, people will say, well, we have due process, and we do. And we don't string them up by the neck until dead anymore. But we could. And with this president, you never know. I mean, hell, he'll shoot a 37-year-old woman in the face just for trying to avoid having a nice guy come in and take control of her car. You know, we already are an occupied country. We already have American citizens being detained illegally, murdered illegally. I'm just telling you right now that if the president of the United States, this president, was faced with a similar situation, we'd be executing those people in very short order. The Iranians have been doing this for some time now. They're fed up. This isn't the first time Israel has organized large-scale demonstrations. Raisi, when he spoke in September of 2023, I believe, at the UN, said that the unrest that followed the tragic death of that Kurdish girl in police custody, he said that put the greatest pressure on the Islamic revolution since the revolution. It was a very dangerous time, he said. They exploited all of the fractures in Iranian society, and they came at us hard. He said, but the Iranian people rallied around and they were able to restore this. Notice what I said, the Iranian people rallied around. The Iranian government didn't violently suppress these people. Those cells still were there. They were supposed to rise up in the 12-day war in June, but the decapitation didn't happen, and the Israelis held them in reserve. But the Iranians know this stuff. They, all those drone operators they caught, they're dead. They got hung, as they deserve to. And now they've caught all the people who committed murder on behalf of Israel. Israel just lost the lion's share of its assets. And this is why Israel's panicking right now, because if Trump doesn't attack, then Israel won't be able to do this again. This was supposed to be the big move. This is supposed to be the regime change. The theocracy is not supposed to exist very soon. Now Israel's looking around saying, America missed the window of opportunity. It's too late. And, but the Iranian government finally, I believe, woke up to the fact that you have to eradicate these cells. You can't play soft. You can't slap a wrist. You can't hang a few. You have to kill them all. And I think that's what they're doing right now. And I don't think the Iranian people are losing too much sleep over this. The Israelis are, and the pro-Israeli faction in the United States are losing a lot of sleep. But, they've had large-scale demonstrations in Iran with millions of people in the street demonstrating for the regime. It's over. The Israelis lost.
Yeah. Ray.
Yeah, it just brings to mind the timing again. Netanyahu was in Mar-a-Lago over the holidays, right? It was after that things got hot and heavy, it seems to me, if memory serves. I don't know exactly, but I'm wondering how much this had to do with Netanyahu feeling he needed a really big boost, okay? He was almost in extremis because Gaza is not going so well, okay? So he needed something to divert attention, and he needed Trump to show that Trump is solidly behind him, okay? He brought that home to him. Trump is solidly behind me. So the way things have now gone down raises in my mind the specter that, well, if it is in extremis for Netanyahu, what's he going to do now? How does this relate to the situation he faces internally and with respect to Gaza? My worry is that this would make it even more likely he would go off half-cocked and that perhaps our president would support him for similar reasons to divert attention to what's going on elsewhere. So I don't know, but it raises hair on the back of my head. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned, of course, is Russia and China. This is not Venezuela, folks. This is right on the Russian border, China. Now, what are they going to do? They have an economic stake there. Oil is really big, especially for China. They need it through the Persian Gulf. So, we used to talk about, well, will you stand idly by when this happens? I don't think they're going to do that anymore. Chinese are very cautious, but the stakes are very high. And I think that both China and Russia, having discrete separate contacts with the United States, subliminal ones, but really better ones than the Biden administration ever had, that they're talking to Trump and saying, look, you're in trouble enough. We're winning in Ukraine. We don't need something right on our border. Ukraine is bad enough. So think about it real strongly.
Yeah, and great points, right? Scott, I wanted, maybe we can spend some time now talking about the consequences. As we are talking, more and more news is rolling in, and I think it would be helpful for the audience to know what the consequences of a war with Iran would be, because now we're even having, and this is surprising to me, this just broke. Israeli and Arab officials have privately suggested the U.S. hold off on Iran strikes. Israeli officials have suggested the Trump administration delay large-scale strikes until the Iranian regime is even more strained, while one Arab official said there's a lack of enthusiasm from the neighborhood for American military action right now. But Scott, there are people who are very enthusiastic about a war with Iran. Here was Lindsey Graham in front of Zionist donors, actually, as the announcement that Trump might attack Iran imminently. Here's what he said.
I don't know what, but this might be the night. It's just a matter of time now. It's just a matter of time. Why is it just a matter of time? And you know what I'm talking about, don't you? This tyrannical regime needs to end. We need to end this for the good people of Iran and for our own selves and the people of Israel. We need to take this guy down. He needs to leave standing up or laying down. I don't care. He needs to go. And if we can pull this off, it'd be the biggest change in the Mideast in 1,000 years. Hamas, Hezbollah, gone. The Houthis, gone. The Iranian people, an ally, not an enemy. The Arab world moving toward Israel without fear. Saudi Israel normalized. No more October the 7th. I haven't slept or eaten in 3 or 4 days.
So he is that enthusiastic, Scott, about this, that he hasn't eaten or slept in days. Scott, talk about what the consequences of a war with Iran, what would they really be? It seems like many Gulf countries, even some in Israel, which is shocking to me, are very much concerned about the consequences.
Israeli infrastructure won't exist when this is done. The Iranians made some clear targeting messaging near the end of the conflict, striking oil refining capabilities, striking some energy production facilities, and then proving they can hit with pinpoint accuracy very specific targets. So they took out, an office here, an office there. To the average onlooker, it was like, oh, well, that's just one missile hitting in a random spot in Tel Aviv. To the Israelis, they went, damn, they hit exactly where that thing was that we were doing. And that also was a signal to the Israelis that the Iranians know about that thing that they were doing. And they hit it and they destroyed it. And that's why Netanyahu panicked. I mean, he was in sheer panic because the Iranians sent very clear messaging that we know everything. And if we want to, we can kill it. But, the problem is Israel hurt Iran. Iran was hurting as well. And so both sides wanted this war to come to an end. But Iran's not going to wait 12 days to send that message. This is going to come on day one. And so, I mean, I'm not saying they will kill Netanyahu, but they could very well kill Netanyahu, depending on his reactive, how he reacts. They could kill a lot of Israeli leadership, and I believe the Israeli leadership will be on the plate. They will destroy the critical infrastructure of Israel, up to and including Dimona. And maybe not the nuclear reactor, but taking out very specific targets, because there's nothing that can defend against what Iran has. You might shoot down 1, 2, 3, 4, but you're not going to shoot them all down. And they're so damn accurate and they're so damn powerful that Israel will be effectively removed from the map. I mean, good. I care about Americans. I don't support Trump, but my God, there's men and women out there who took the oath to wear, to serve their country. They're wearing the uniform of their country. And we have a duty and responsibility to ensure that their lives aren't thrown away in vain. They got their orders. They had to deploy. They have to do the jobs they're given. They're sitting ducks. And the Iranians know everything. They know every target. And the Iranians aren't going to hold back. I don't believe they are. I don't believe there will be a warning shot. I think when the time comes, the Iran will smother American bases the same way they're going to smother Israel. And that's it. And then if the war continues and Israel strikes, for instance, strategic energy targets inside Iran, then you're going to see Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz, destroy Saudi oil fields, destroy UAE oil fields. And now we have an energy crisis in the world that nobody's ready for. I mean, Donald Trump's like, well, we got Venezuelan oil. It's still in the ground, Donnie. Still in the ground. Even your big oil company say it's going to take a while to get it out in any significant. This should be a lesson to anybody who starts playing stupid games with oil infrastructure. When you have a nation like Venezuela that was producing 3 million barrels a day at one point in time, does anybody here know about well maintenance, pressurization, about water pressure, about water levels? What do you have to do with a well once you start extracting oil to prevent water from seeping in and contaminating? What kind of pressures you have to maintain? And you have to maintain them in an active manner as the oil is extracted. It's not reactive. It's all planned out. So when you start decommissioning production and you start drawing these wells down, that pressure goes away, water levels rise, you get a dilution, you corrupt the integrity of the product. Now, that doesn't mean it's unusable. It just means that you just made it much more expensive when they finally get it out. And then when you come back, you've got to repressurize, you got to do the whole thing. This is reality. This happens when the only nation in the world that can get away with this is Saudi Arabia, who massively on purpose overproduced their oil extraction infrastructure because they were supposed to be the brake. They were supposed to be in the United States. Well, we need more oil in the economy. Hey, Saudi Arabia, jack it up a little bit. Right. We need to, get the prices to go. Hey, Saudi Arabia, slow it down a little bit. We got to manage this. And Saudi Arabia would do that. Saudi Arabia would increase production, decrease production based upon the orders given by the United States. But that requires global stability in terms of energy. But when the United States goes in and we destroy stability through the stupidity of our sanctions, America, just look around my house right now. Light, energy, oil, plastics, oil. Oil is everywhere. Oil is in everything we have here. Oil just doesn't go to producing gasoline. Oil makes modern life possible. We need a lot of it on a sustainable fashion. And the stupidity of America's policies are designed to deny oil to the market. Now, we produce our own oil, but the price will go up. I don't know about the average American out there, but my bank account is extraordinarily finite. And when prices go up and my income doesn't match it, that means that I'm buying less with what I earn. And when you start increasing the price of oil, all prices go up. It has a cascading impact. This is our future, guys. They're going to kill thousands of Americans, tens of thousands of Israelis, fundamentally alter the Middle East economy like you've never seen. And the blowback to our economy and the global economy will be disastrous. Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoyed it, because next Christmas, you may not be able to do what you did. This is Donald Trump. This is the most evil man on the planet, the most dangerous man in the world, and this is what he's doing today. You don't buy into this crap about the evil Iranian regime. Look, the one time, when Ahmadinejad was elected president, I bought in sort of to the, Ahmadinejad, bad guy. But then I went to Iran to investigate. This is during Ahmadinejad's time. These are the most wonderful people in the world. They're peace-loving. They are friendly. They love Americans. They've just bent over backwards to be hospitable. They're highly educated. They're modern. We're Americans. Our standard of living. Go to Iran, guys. Take a look at their standard of living. I drove on the superhighway out of Tehran, going towards Qom, going towards where the Natanz facility was. There's a city nearby. I can't remember the name of it. But it's a superhighway, and I went into their rest center. Clean, modern toilets. They flush, and they're clean. There's none of this smell you get in the New York, throughway. The smell of some drunk who decided he was going to miss the urinal and just pee on the floor, and they're not going to clean it up, or the guy who emptied his bowels in the back and it's overflowed. And that doesn't exist in Iran. It's clean. They had fast food, but it was good food. It was healthy food. The idea that the Iranians are backwards, that that they're looking to the West for a superior way of life is absurd in the extreme. I've been to Iran, and I would dare say that 99.99% of the people out there who are slamming Iran today have never been to Iran, and they don't know the reality of Iran.
Yeah, right, too.
Yeah, let me comment on Air Force Colonel Lindsey Graham, who was a lawyer in Air Force, and he was after deserters and people who didn't want to go to war, and he lived. He did live in the barracks. He lived in the officers club and so forth. Lindsey Graham is the kind of guy that Defense Minister Healy in London is. And I just want to kind of put a reality to this, because although the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova is the consummate diplomat, every now and then she loses it, okay? And what she said, when Healy said, we're going to kidnap Putin, he's first on our list, we're going to kidnap him and try him for war crimes. This is what she said officially on Russian TV. Defense Secretary John Healy, his remarks are, and I quote, "the wet dreams of British perverts," period, quote. Okay. So now you have this kind of thing with Lindsey Graham. You have this kind of thing from Central Casting, Dick Tracy type, Trin Pete Hegseth. The problem is that if you take this, or if you're required to take this seriously, as Putin and Xi are, you say, my God, we have a delusional narcissist as president of the United States. We don't know what he's going to do. There is no break. As a matter of fact, these people catalyze his narcissism and give him the idea that we're the kind of martinets that will support you no matter what. And besides, we look pretty good on TV. So we're going to. Now, the problem with all that is, if you're Putin, let's say Putin, he's looking at all this, my God, who does the president have to rely on for some solid advice? Well, the answer is maybe Tulsi Gabbard. Where was Tulsi Gabbard when the big decisions were being made in Venezuela? Oh, she was sunning herself in Hawaii. Okay, I think that's probably the truth. She was not consulted. So let me just bring this back to a historical perspective here. When the CIA was created, Truman wanted one agency that would have access to all the information available to the Pentagon, the State Department, the code breakers, everybody else, a central place where he could go, the president, and say, look, you told me like it is. Or, tell me what's going on. I don't care what the Pentagon is saying. They're 12 feet tall. These Soviets. The State Department says they're only 5 feet tall. You look. I give you career protection for telling me the truth. Now, that's what analysts did. That's what I did for 2/3 of my career until Bobby Gates and Bill Casey messed it all up. Okay. Well, we were able to tell the president that. Now, what about regime change? Okay. Oh, that was something that when the legislation was being prepared, none other than George Kennan said, oh my God, the Russians are, the Soviets are assassinating people. They're all kinds of dirty tricks. They have these mokria yala, these wet things. We have to have the same capability. And they put that into the legislation. Legislation reads, the president, the CIA, the director of the CIA shall perform such other tasks and duties, besides the major thing of analysis, as such other functions and duties as the president of the United States shall from time to time direct. So you have two CIAs. The one that Tulsi Gabbard has tried to resurrect and reestablish the analysis part, who were cut out of this Venezuela operation because the operatives were telling the president and telling everyone else, yeah, we can do this. Of course we can do that. And when somebody said, what about next week or what about next year? That was an impolite. That was a bit out of the question. Okay. So what I'm saying here has historical precedent. Okay. What happened in 1953? Well, I graduated from elementary school in 1953. I learned later that we overthrew a leftist-leaning, Soviet-inclined puppet who happened to be the freely, independently elected prime minister of Iran for the first time in 2 millennia. Okay? Now, what was his name? Mossadegh. What was his offense? Oh, he had the temerity, mind you, to say, I think the Iranian people should profit a little bit more from the riches under our sands. So they call it oil. Yeah, we shouldn't give it all to the British. And now the British, MI6, took the fledgling CIA, mind you, just 1953, by the shoulder and said, no, you young guys, you have to understand, this is what you do when an upstart in the third world thinks that the oil underneath his soil belongs to him. And there was a terrible coup in so the next year they did Guatemala. They've been doing this all the time. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that this is in the legislation. And when later President Kennedy, and this is perhaps the best example, I'm trying to give a context here. When Kennedy came into office, they briefed him on the Bay of Pigs, that all these rebel forces that had trained really well in Guatemala, elsewhere, they're going to invade Cuba. And guess what, Mr. President Kennedy? The Fidel Castro is going to fall because there'll be a public insurrection and we'll get rid of those communists in Cuba. Okay. Now, Kennedy looked at the plans and he said, I don't think so. Oh, you say Eisenhower approved it? Well, go ahead. But look, don't expect me to authorize the use of U.S. armed forces in case you get bogged down on the beach. Now, they laughed at him. They said, and we know from Hallam Dulles' handwritten notes, coffee-stained handwritten notes from his desk after he died, that he said, when we get caught on the beach, the president will have no other option other than to support us with aircraft and army stuff, lest the enterprise fail. Enterprise remove Castro. Okay, so it was a setup. What did JFK do? and this is what every president should do. He said, hey, who's around here that can look into why these people told me that Castro is going to fall? Oh, Arthur Schlesinger Jr. You're a historian, but could you take 2 months off? Yeah, 2 months, and look at how this farcical explanation that how did it happen? So he went to less than 2 months. We have the memo now. Schlesinger to Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, I hate to tell you this, but the analysis division of CIA was cut out of this whole thing. They were not even informed that would happen, much less asked for their views on, for example, whether Fidel Castro would be the victim of a popular insurrection. All the analysts said that was crazy, that would never happen, but they weren't consulted. So it was the operatives who wanted to run the operation. Now, the same thing is happening in Venezuela. The same thing is happening anytime you have not only a CIA director like John Ratcliffe, but when you have a national security advisor. Now, who's the national security? Oh my God, that's
Marco
Rubio.
Rubio.
Yeah. Now, Rubio is also the Secretary of State, but national security advisor gives you the ability, the duty really, to funnel things into the president. You can be very selective, and a lot of what Trump has been led to believe comes from Rubio for sure. So all I'm saying here is that needs to be fixed. And will it be fixed? Well, one hope springs eternally, but when Tulsi Gabbard proves to have been right about this kind of thing, when her memos from her analysts on Venezuela can be dug out of the computers, I think there's a chance that there'll be a reckoning, and especially if Venezuela becomes the United States' new Vietnam, and I'm pretty sure it will, unless they stop it right now. Then maybe, just maybe, people come to their senses, realize there are two CIAs, separate them out, give the operations people to the Pentagon where it should be, and let the intelligence people do the analysis and come up with what Truman called several times untreated intelligence, which means tell me like it is, don't flavor it, don't distort it. And last thing I'll say is that the worst crime, and I saw it, and so did Scott, on Iraq, okay? We know that on July 20th, 2002, the head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, came to Langley to ask George Tenet, the director of Central Intelligence, what does Bush really plan to do? Now, Tony Blair talks to him every week, but, it's not the same as, so Tony asked me to come, what are you going to do? And when Blair went back to when Sir Richard Dearlove went back to Blair, we have the minutes of that meeting, and it says the operative sentence, the operative paragraph, Bush has decided to invade Iraq on the pretense of weapons of mass destruction and terrorism. Translation, we're going to say he has weapons of mass destruction, and then he's going to give them to terrorists. We're going to associate Saddam Hussein with 9/11. It will work like a charge, and then the crowning sentence. But the facts and the analysis is being shaped around the policy. So Blair knew that, Tenet knew that, and they did it anyway. And my saddest time is watching my former colleagues who were participants in that fraud get meritorious step increases and prizes for fashioning a national intelligence estimate that was fraudulent from the get-go, and which they knew was fraudulent, all to please the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney. May he rest in peace forever.
Yeah. Quickly, before we get to the final story on Russia, Ukraine, Scott and Ray, speaking of history, if you can just comment on this, one of the big things about this regime change operation, or attempted one, is the support that the United States and now the Trump administration openly supporting the grandson of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi. And according to sources, Steve Witkoff met with Reza Pahlavi privately. And so maybe you can help us out with a bit of a history lesson briefly on what does this say? I mean, what is this? We have the United States meeting openly with someone not even in the country, with a deep, deep history, a family history with Iran that is very dark. What does this say about the Trump administration and U.S. foreign policy right now, Scott?
It's the foreign policy of a madman and the foreign policy of a bully. Look, why would first of all, who is Steve Witkoff? He's a special envoy. He's not an expert on anything except maybe New York State real estate and Donald Trump. Donald Trump trusts him. That's the thing. But this isn't a guy that can go and have a back channel communication and get deep insights and then sit down and, based upon his own extensive experience, shape something together that would be, useful to the president. He's there just for show. He's meeting with, the Shah's son, this crown prince who, claims the throne. There's nothing substantive in this meeting. Witkoff is incapable of substantive dialogue. He is superficial in the extreme. So he's just going through the motions of creating an image, a perception that the United States is actively working with this guy who Israel is using to orchestrate this social media campaign to promote him as a potential successor to the supreme leader. It also says that the United States isn't serious. Look, if I were the crown prince, I'd be like, I don't want Steve Witkoff. I want the national security advisor. I want Marco Rubio. I want, Pete Hegseth. I want somebody who actually can, that's a policy maker. Witkoff's not a policy maker. He's not even a policy implementer. He's a policy, he's the coat of wax you put on your car. He's not serious. He's not a serious person. So it doesn't tell me anything other than the fact that the Trump administration just isn't serious. It's not serious about doing this right. The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump is a prisoner of the CIA. They are running everything. I don't want to jump the gun in Russia, but I'll just say this, and maybe it's a good segue into Russia. The CIA has been at war with Russia forever, when it was the Soviet Union.
That's our job. That's our job. Yeah.
That's right. Ray was an analyst, and your job was to ascertain the truth and brief people about Russia, but mainly you were looking for vulnerabilities that could be exploited, or strengths that needed to be countered. You weren't evaluating Russia from the friendship factor. Mr. President, today, on a scale of 1 to 10, friendship factor is 8. I think we could have good relations with these people. No, you're Mr. President.
Actually, that happened in the 1970s and the 80s. So, it was a mixed bag, but we were trying to do it objectively, as you know, Scott. And there were times of détente, of rapprochement. Correct. And we almost had that again, almost. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
But the operators never bought into it. The operator's job was never to do. The operator's job was to destroy the Soviet Union and destroy. Everybody focuses on the case officers and the spying. I mean, that's a big part of things. But you do know that the CIA is responsible for the largest non-nuclear explosion in history. And that's the sabotage of a Russian gas line.
Oh,
a Soviet gas line. This is what the CIA does. They are a destructive force, and on Russia, they have been seeking to bring down. Having brought down the Soviet Union, the decade of the 1990s, the CIA was just positioning the United States to keep the knee on the throat. We were very close to Boris Yeltsin. Our assets were everywhere, and our job was to manage him, to keep Russia down, to weaken them. And when we are having trouble weakening Russia, we then went and we created a conflict in Chechnya by pouring in Wahhabists, outside influencers, etc., both in the 90s, later in the early 2000s. And then we started sending people out to Kazan, in the Tatar Republic to try and get them to break away, to Ufa and Bashkir to get the Muslims to break. We tried to turn the Muslims against the Russians. This was the CIA's job. This is what they were trying to do, regime change. And they've never been given the off switch. Never. The whole Navalny thing is a giant CIA setup, straight up. I mean, they worked with the British. You got Navalny's campaign manager meeting with a British spy out of the embassy, asking for $10 million.
On tape.
On tape. It's right there. And the Russians have they have the spy rock. Remember the spy rock where the British would come by and download messages, and then Russians would come by with their little phone and upload messages, and the Russians went, why don't we monitor this for a while? So they're getting all the information. Guys coming in going, we need $5 million. And the British coming in going, all right, you'll find the $5 million here. And then the people get that and start heading, and they get nabbed by the FSB. We say, okay, now you got to play the game along. And they drug it until they got the whole thing laid out. The Russians rolled up our own networks. I mean, there's the Foley, who the stupidity. The CIA is not there to promote friendship; they're there to destroy. And with Ukraine, when Ukraine came along in 2014, 2015, the CIA was given the job of preparing for war, and they prepared the Ukrainians for deep strikes. They worked with the British to identify deep cellular structures within Russia that could be mobilized to support things like building a drone factory and sending trucks out to have drones come up and attack strategic bombers. And the CIA is actively plotting not only to destroy Russian oil infrastructure, they admit it. The CIA, Ray called it out. The New York Times is just the mouthpiece of the CIA. They literally colluded with the CIA on a covert operation that's attacking a nuclear-armed superpower, and admitting it, bragging about it. I believe the timing that was supposed to be linked to a 91 drone attack on Putin's residence, which we know now they were attacking the residence because the Russians had the chip. But the point is, this is what the CIA is doing. Now, for a while there, I thought that this was a rogue operation because Trump, I'll be the first one to say, I thought Trump was serious about peace with Russia. I really did think that he was serious about peace with Russia. It turns out he was never serious about peace with Russia. That peace with Russia was always a setup. That Donald Trump's objectives have been aligned with the CIA objectives from day one in this administration to bring down the regime of Vladimir Putin. Straight up, bring it down. When John Ratcliffe in May of last year put out his 5-page whitewashing of Julian Garganis, the former national intelligence officer of that, he basically said, yes, she was there when the intelligence community's attack on Trump took place, but she didn't have anything to do with it. She was hands off. Meanwhile, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, is getting ready to declassify Matt Gates's report. Not Matt Gates, I forget who the California congressman, can't remember his name, but he did a report that was just belittled by the Obama administration. Turns out he was on to something, because he basically said these people hate Donald Trump and they cooked up information to frame Donald Trump. And the person that was behind this was Julian Garganis. Now, so as soon as she published this thing, they put her out into the pasture. She was still CIA, but she was off at a think tank doing think tank stuff. They brought her back. Radcliffe brought her back. Why? She was the person on Air Force One briefing Donald Trump as he flew to Alaska to meet Vladimir Putin. Now, when I heard that, when I found that out, I'm like, wait a minute. She's a known hater of Trump, but worse, she's a hater of Putin. Why would you have a Putin hater briefing the president on the eve of a mission that's supposed to be peace, to create the spirit of Alaska? Because it was all a setup, and Donald Trump was in on the setup, straight up in on the setup. He has been targeting Vladimir Putin from day one. Alaska was a fraud. Alaska was designed to create the idea that things could get better. Kirill Dmitriev, meeting with Steve Witkoff. Man, we can lift sanctions and make billions, trillions of dollars. We can build a tunnel. We can connect Alaska with Siberia, baby. Build this tunnel. We can do everything. And everybody's going to be so rich. It's going to be crazy. And the Russians went, cool. And they started planning cells. Governors would have planning cells. But the problem is when you do that, people start counting their money before it's in the bank. They sit there and go, holy cow, if they lift this and America comes in and we get deep, oh, baby, we get that oil out. We can put it on the, man, I'm already driving my Maserati. I got the Dacia that I'm going to go to Dubai. I'm spending all this money. That's what the whole purpose was. It's mental warfare. And then at the appropriate time, Donald Trump goes, yeah, no, we're going to double down, sanction Rosneft, sanction Lukoil, and it's all Vladimir Putin's fault. Everybody, all those Russians that were spending the money go, damn it, Putin, that's the goal. Damn it, Putin, to get him up there. They tried to kill Vladimir Putin. Straight up. We know there's no ifs, ands, or buts. The chip they turned over to the United States has the exact coordinates of the residents on it. And the intelligence that was packaged in there to guide this drone in there is very specific intelligence, packaged in a unique manner, a digital fingerprint that lends itself to the Tomahawk targeting cell that's in Europe, Department of Defense. It's the only place in the world that can do this. And they have a relationship with Palantir, who then took it and gave it to the Ukrainians, who loaded it on in real-time fashion. The Russians know this. Now, they handed it over to the United States. They didn't say anything. They went, here, look at it. And the United States will look at it. And when you do that, they're going to go, they know everything because it's all there. It's all there. We tried, I'm not going to say to kill Putin, because again, the time of flight of the drones and such, the Russians would have put him in a bunker that couldn't be hit by these. But we attacked the president of Russia. Why? Trump was sending a signal. You're weak. You're weak. I'm making you go underground. I'm Donald Trump. You're weak. And the whole idea is, again, to diminish Putin in the eyes of the Russian political and economic elite who have been empowered now with the dream of wealth, to create a fifth column to bring down Putin, because that's the CIA's job. And Donald Trump ordered them to do it. So peace is dead. There is no hope whatsoever for the restoration of this. The Russians, Lavrov put out a statement. We're not walking away from American dialogue yet. Why would they? You need dialogue to prevent a nuclear war. Remember, with Biden, there was no dialogue. So the Russians will keep the chain of command open. But then they said, yeah, but this latest thing changes everything. There's no more, let's just put it this way. What you thought was going to happen ain't going to happen. It's going to be something different. Then they followed up, and this is the most important thing here out of all of everything, which I believe is important. They fired a second Iranian. And that closes the door on any potential of a resurrection of the INF Treaty, of bringing stability to Europe. The Russians, Dmitry Medvedev and others have come out and said that Oreshnik intermediate range missiles are now a major aspect of Russia's strategic nuclear deterrence. And it will be used. It gives Russia the ability to escalate using strategic forces in a non-nuclear fashion. Now they've now made it their policy. It is there. They are deploying units. And Ryabkov came out the other day and said, yeah, Oreshnik's cool. More. They're better. And they're coming on. I can't name them right now, but they're there. They're ready to be used. And we saw it. The Iskander M, 1,000 kilometers now, 800 miles. INF system. They've taken, Russia will never back down from INF now. It is a permanent part of their posture because Europe is irresponsible, America is irresponsible. Donald Trump put the other nail in the coffin. $1.5 trillion defense budget, decided to breathe life into Golden Dome. The Russians said, you do Golden Dome, there is no arms control. New START expires next month. It will not be revived, and there will be no cap because the United States is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into mass production of plutonium pits. We're going to rapidly expand this. And watch what this idiot does, because as we rapidly expand, I'm sure someone's going to say, some of these are new designs, boss. We need to test them. And you go test them, do it. Boom. Now we got nuclear testing. The Russians are going to matter. We're literally in a nuclear arms race right now. There is no hope whatsoever for arms control. It is dead. The Russians have made it clear now that they have the advantage. They won the nuclear arms race, by the way. They have overmatch across the board, and they're not going to give it up. And for the United States to match them, you remember in the Cold War how they said, we forced the Soviet Union to spin themselves into death? Remember that one?
Yeah.
Star Wars, and we forced them in. Well, the Russians right now are just sitting there going, we got it all. What do you got? Nothing, right? Oh, go ahead and spend that money. Spend that $3, $5, $7 trillion you have to spend to catch up. That isn't going to catch up. You're never going to catch up. This is where the Russians are sitting. And as long as you have a president of the United States that tries to kill a Russian president, they will never negotiate anything that removes or reduces their ability to defend themselves. Because the one thing the Russians have is the guarantee that if the United States ever did kill the Russian president, the United States would cease to exist. So, it's over. They'll talk. They'll keep the communication over, but they don't trust us at all. Zero trust.
Well, okay, yeah. Now, let me claim equal time. I've taken some notes, Scott. Let me see where we start. Maybe we'll start with the Shah's son. I have met the Shah's son. They were back in the day, 20 years ago, when I used to be in green rooms or blue rooms. And I was warned, not warned, but a very excited person with the Shah's son came, Mr. McGovern, the Shah's son is coming in. And so he came into the blue room right where I was standing, and I was supposed to be impressed. And I didn't say nothing, okay? I just looked at him, and I remember my Irish grandmother, if that's society, excuse me. So I stuck up my hand, and I want to tell you, that was the limpest kind of hand that I've ever shook, okay? Now, in contrast, as Scott knows, I was at the parade on May 8th in Moscow, had pretty good seats. Scott saw me up there with some pretty big dignitaries. The point is, I got a chance to shake the hand of Maduro. Now, I want to tell you, that hand is 2 times as big as mine, and he almost crushed my hand, right? Now, this is all allegorical, but I think I'm going to play here. The Shah's son, did they think there's a following for the Shah's son in Iran? I mean, who told Witkoff that was sort of a sign, I guess, to people they thought. I mean, there aren't any, there are maybe 100 people. They're all descendants of the Shah. Anyhow, so that was sort of a crazy thing. How about the flight to Anchorage? After she briefed the president, he told a Fox reporter, and I quote, I'm really excited here, but, if we don't come out with some kind of ceasefire on this, I'm going to be awfully disappointed. He Witkoff already told him that there wasn't going to be any ceasefire agreed to by the Russians. And yet he told him, why did he say, I've always been wondering. Well, I think I know why. He was briefed by this Russophobe saying, well, they should give you a ceasefire. Anyhow, the way it came out, Trump apparently made this overture, and Putin said, hey, I thought we told you if that's a no-goer. And of course, he backed off, and 2 hours later, Trump checked out, we're not going to do a ceasefire. We're going to do the whole enchilada. We're going to get the whole agreement, okay? The other thing, the other part of the agreement, which people don't really remember, is that Trump agreed to sit on Zelensky and the European 7 dwarfs, okay? Now, indeed, Trump convened the 7 dwarfs 3 days after Anchorage, and they sat before him as if before a tutor in the White House. And in the midst of it, Trump said, "Oh, sorry, Putin's given me a call. Would you please leave, please? I'll let you know when you can come back. Maybe 20 minutes. Yeah, okay." So he thought that would give these guys the message. It didn't. And so Trump was unable to fulfill his pledge to Putin to rein Zelensky in and his compatriots in Europe and make sure they don't put the kibosh on an agreement toward a real reconciliation or a real agreement on Ukraine. So that was the Anchorage agreement, and I think that was something that that Trump blessed, and actually the evidence is clear that he put Witkoff, and I don't share Scott's view of Witkoff. I think he doesn't know much about foreign relations, but he's a damn good negotiator. With this, well, don't ask me, ask Vladimir Putin, who has seen him, I think, 7 or 8 times, sometimes for over, well, one time for over 4 hours. So let me just continue this sort of thing. What else did oh yeah, the other thing I want to say was, Scott, you're referring to the big gas explosion in Siberia, right? That where we sabotaged. Yeah. Well, you know who wrote a term paper about that?
You?
A guy named Anthony Blinken.
Oh,
you know about that, yeah. It's all laid out there. And of course, Blinken, after Nord Stream was blown up, or said, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity for economic advancement for us in America. America first. So, okay, is there anything else? Yeah, just this. Well, no, I'll stop there. But I'll say this. Now, Danny, I sent you one sentence. Did you have a chance to kind of put that up there, because it indicates exactly where Scott and I disagree on interpretation. Well, I'll just read the sentence.
Right. Okay. I could read the sentence too.
Right.
I'll read it. How about that? Despite this attack, we have no intention to withdraw from negotiations with the U.S. However, given the utmost degeneration of the criminal Kiev regime, which has shifted to a policy of state terrorism, Russia's negotiating position will be reviewed. That was Sergei Lavrov directly after the attempted assassination of Putin. But you're
same day. So this is, in my view, the only real official reaction we have. Lavrov was told to say these things, no doubt, cleared it with Putin, and it's a 2-part paragraph. And who's got the best idea on this? I don't know. But the first part says, despite this attack, we have no intention to withdraw from negotiations with the United States, period. Now, the second part is, however, adnaka, the Russians have a great word, adnaka, it means however, given the utmost degeneration of the criminal Kiev regime, which has shifted to a policy of state terrorism, Russia's negotiating position will be reviewed. I'll just add one sentence. I think it's not over until the fat lady sings, okay? Now, the fat lady, that is Putin, Lavrov, may have sung in confidential conversations with their opposite numbers in Washington. I don't know that. It's possible that they say, go to hell. We're out of it. It's arms control is over. But I'd like to see them say that publicly, because I would expect them to do that. Last thing, the attack on Putin's, what the Russians call the state residence there near Valdai, okay? You're right. They have the ports now. They have that little, computer, that little gizmo that they can show exactly where that drone was targeted. Now, the Russians would never give that to the United States unless, in my view, unless it proved beyond reasonable doubt that that's exactly where it was headed. Now, the U.S. has had that for 6 days, okay? Now, have they examined it? Who did they give it to? Oh, they probably gave it to the CIA. And the CIA said, do you want us to shape our analysis around the policy, Mr. Trump? Or you want to give us, the honest answer is, yeah, that was programmed right to hit the residents. But then about the technology, you know more about this than I, Scott, but I would ask, this is DOD technology. Have we not shared that with NATO? In other words, could it be that it was one of the NATO partners that put this technology in a place in Ukraine where it could be used to fire these drones out? In other words, even though it's Western technology, even though it was developed by Department of Defense here, could it be that someone else other than the CIA or the armed forces or the president gave this for it to be used in this manner? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a lingering question. I would really like to hear your take on.
Yeah. Scott,
We'll start with this. Lavrov's response came out the same day of the attack.
Right.
And that was at a time when President Trump said that he was very upset about this, that he was very angry with Zelensky if this was indeed the case.
Right.
After that statement was made, Trump changed his position radically. And then he called Putin a liar. He said, "You're lying. Didn't happen."
Well, he didn't use those words.
Literally called him a liar, right? He literally called him a liar.
No, what he said was,
this didn't happen. It didn't happen. It happened. The Russians that's the importance of this chip. You see.
Yeah, that was the fourth.
The CIA colluded with the New York Times to publish an article about how the CIA was targeting in the most direct, intimate way possible, Russian oil infrastructure.
Right.
Precision strikes.
Oil, but then say about the residents.
The same drones, using the same guidance. It's the same weapon. It's a CIA-run asset, the 14th Regiment, launching the same drone, using the same chips, directed by the CIA. And the CIA had been working with the New York Times on this article for days, if not weeks prior to. The timing of the release of this article is not an accident. The CIA was sending a signal. We are targeting you.
Right.
We are targeting you.
The CIA,
the chip was given to the Russians days after Trump called Putin a liar, after he said none of what the Russians are saying is true. And the CIA gave this, the Russians gave this chip, and that chip does a couple things. The chip proves that the residence was the target. There's no doubt about it. But given this drone and the way this drone, Palantir, this drone is a drone jointly produced by the Germans and the Ukrainians.
Right.
The guidance system is actually a German chip produced by Germany. But Palantir is responsible for the targeting, not the German government. Palantir does the targeting.
Okay.
And Palantir says that they get commercially available intelligence that they then blend with intelligence given to the Ukrainians by
NATO.
By whomever. They didn't say NATO. By whomever. And it's blended in. The assumption is supposed to be Germany, NATO, all this. But here's the thing. The technology that's being used, which is AI-driven technology, mirrors that of the Tomahawk guidance system, but slowed down because you're in a drone. But basically, there's no GPS. The thing gets launched in a trajectory. Halfway through, it does a course correction based upon timing. It'll turn on either radar or a camera. It will take an image that is then matched with data stored in the drone, and it'll align itself and keep going. But there's other data that comes in. Wind speed, weather conditions, the guidance that they go around the air defense networks. This is stuff that's only collected. It's not collected by commercially available resources.
Right.
And the specificity of the information can only be collected by the United States. And the way it was packaged, the way it was packaged, is a unique signature. Remember, the Russians have complete Tomahawk missiles. You know, the ones we fired into Syria that sort of ended up in a field? So the Tomahawk guidance system is not unfamiliar to the Russians. And those Tomahawks that were fired received their digital targeting packet from the DoD. They're the ones who make it up. And they're the ones who send it out via classified communication means to the various ships that then program it up.
Is
So
that
the
NATO?
Russians have the
Is that
Russians have the
NATO?
digital signature. NATO can't do this. NATO cannot do this. Only the United States can do
Yeah,
this.
the United States gives it to NATO.
We don't. We don't give it to NATO.
Okay, so NATO has no way of using the kind of U.S. specific technology that you described, and no way to give that to the Ukrainians.
NATO has Scalp missiles. NATO has Storm Shadow missiles. NATO has the German Taurus that hasn't been provided.
Right.
But the specific targeting system is they're different targeting systems
Okay.
that use different inputs. The digital fingerprint of this chip is a DoD digital fingerprint, and that was given. There's a reason why they gave it to the Americans. They didn't give it to the Americans to point the finger at Germany. They didn't give it to the Americans to point the finger at France or the United Kingdom. They gave it to the Americans to point the finger at Donald Trump, who lied to them, straight up lied to them. And they now know that he tried to kill the president of Russia. That's what they know. Now you say you'd like them to make a statement. Let me give you a following statement that the Russians have made. When I was in Russia in November, I met with the Gorky Institute. That's a group out of St. Petersburg. Karen Knissel, the former foreign minister of Austria, runs it, and it's in close collaboration with the Russian foreign ministry. And we were at that time trying to figure out how we could put arms control on the agenda. The Russian government made it clear, very clear to me, that they weren't going to talk about arms control. They weren't going to talk about Oreshnik. They weren't going to talk about nuclear anything. That was all hushed up because of the close communications that were supposed to be taking place with the United States on this issue. Meanwhile, while they're waiting for that, Lavrov's saying, they ain't picking up the phone. We're waiting here. We're ready. They ain't picking up the phone. Nobody's talking to us. But we did come up with a thing where we were going to do mock negotiations. And the idea of the mock negotiations was to go through the processes of problem solving related to the various issues related to New START extension, INF, ABM. And the Russian government went, we like that idea. That's a good idea. Because that's not making policy, but that's getting it out there. That's moving it forward in a positive way. We're going to do it in St. Petersburg, bring a similar thing parallel to the United States, have these two things together so you could deliver packets of information to the foreign ministry and the State Department. And they were all on board. They just pulled the plug. They said, we ain't doing arms control. It ain't happening. It's dead. Now, they haven't done that publicly, but I'm just here to tell you right now, the foreign ministry was excited about this. They ain't excited about it anymore. The Russians, they're not interested. They fired the Oreshnik. That means that the Oreshnik is now, as Dmitry Medvedev said, an integral part of their nuclear deterrence posture. And they're not giving it up to a lying sack of manure government that tried to kill the president. Remember, the Russians are furious about this. They're furious about this because this isn't a CIA accident.
Yeah,
this is a directed activity by the CIA, directed by the president of the United States, who's covering for the CIA right now. That's the Russian interpretation.
Well,
Ray, well, before you go, briefly, I did have one more question for both of you. So, Ray, just please finish, but I have one more question, and then we can close.
Okay. Yeah, the Russians are furious. They were furious when the Ukrainians attacked their bomber fields, part of their triad deterrent. What did they do? Well, they complained more about drones that dropped a railroad bridge and killed some civilians. They were furious, but they did not make a big federal case out of it. There were other things that they're furious about. But what I'm trying to say here is that Putin may be furious, but he's calm, cool, and collected. This statement by Lavrov, you'll recall, blames it on the terrorists in Ukraine. If Putin is briefed and told erroneously, in your view, Scott, that this was NATO for sure. We don't know if the U.S. did it directly, then he will have a way of blaming it on Ukraine again. Now, the other thing is that there's been no response. It's been a good week, if memory serves, that the U.S. has had this component that they could analyze. Now, let's say that, of course, I bow to you on your expertise, that it shows that it was targeted right on the state residents and that it was U.S. technology. This, in my view, is a litmus test. If Putin, as I believe he was, has been interested first and foremost to have a umbrella good relationship with the United States, why would he want that? To avoid a nuclear war. Is that clear enough? I think it's very clear, and I think they've made that very clear. He's a cautious guy, and this guy is irascible. He's unpredictable. You gotta be careful with him. That's the priority. Okay. Now, if he still wants to hope that people like Witkoff and others can work out things on Ukraine, for example, then he has the option of being furious, but being also Putin. But if the administration comes back with an answer that says, no, Mr. Putin, you're lying. We can tell that you're lying. These were actually, we know that they weren't headed toward. If it comes back with that kind of massaging of the intelligence, or equally bad, if they don't respond at all, if even in secure channels there's no response, Putin will have to take this as the next to the last straw. What's the last straw? New START. Okay. Putin made a personal plea to the United States president on the 22nd of February, as you know better than anyone, Scott, that he would abide by the quantitative limits on offensive missiles and bombers and so forth of New START, even after it expires on February 5th. Okay. Now, what has Trump said? Well, a couple of weeks later, some journalist said, "What do you think of that?" Oh, I think it sounds like a good idea to me. The Russians have been imploring the U.S., please, could we please have a more official response? Okay, they've gotten none. It's less than 4 weeks now. If there's no response, or if it's a negative response, then I would say you're right. Arms control is dead. Okay. Then I would say the fat lady has sung. But until that time, I see that the fat lady has not sung the final song yet. And, I'm happy to engage in this conversation
but Trump did answer. Just
what
the
did he
other
say?
day.
What did he say?
They said New START's expiring, so it expires. That was his answer. So it expires.
Well, that's not an official answer in my view.
He's the president of the United States. He said so.
When did he say that? How did I miss that?
I don't know how you missed it, but he said it in all of this stupidity that's going on. It's a throwaway statement that the media didn't pick up on. I picked up on it. And Putin did respond. The Ministry of Defense made it very clear that the firing of the Oreshnik, and this is why I put so much emphasis on it, was a direct response to the attack against Putin's residence.
Now, Scott, I would argue that the Oreshnik, the Russians have described that as an intermediate range missile, correct? Okay. Now, when Putin was asked about this at one of the Q&As, he was asked, what are the prospects for arms control? He said, there's a two-part answer here. If the Americans agree to prolong the quantitative limits of New START, I know what to expect for the next year. If they don't, that's a different kettle of fish, and it's more complicated now because of middle-range ballistic missiles that need to be taken into account, and of course, China. So Putin has made it very clear that there's a difference in Russian eyes between the intermediate-range ballistic missiles, which they still consider the Oreshnik, and the main thing, which I would say is the supreme litmus test, if Trump cannot agree to prolong those limits. No negotiations, no talks, it's just yes or a no. If you can't do that, Putin will have to say, all right, you guys were right. He's not his own man. Even if he would like to do that, he can't do that. We will draw the necessary conclusions. Then the fat lady will have sung.
But he's just real quick. There's two other conditions Putin put on it, right? First is that if the intermediate missiles aren't contained, that if they become deployed and all this, if the United States deploys Dark Eagle, all bets are off. And the second one was Golden Dome. Said there can be no Golden Dome. Trump just put forward a $1.5 trillion defense budget. It's all about Golden Dome.
You're right.
So it's over. It's dead. It's finished. It's done. Putin doesn't back away from his thing. And I just want to remind you, the Oreshnik may be an intermediate range missile. It's a strategic asset. It's operated by the Strategic Rocket Forces, operate under the same command structure.
Right.
And it's targeted as part of the strategic targeting. They don't have, this isn't a tactical or operational system. The decision to use Oreshnik was a strategic decision by the president of Russia, and the Ministry of Defense made it clear that it was directly related to the attack on Putin's residence.
You're right, Scott. I would say that you remember the last part of that overture on the 22nd of September, which included those things that you just said. And I compliment you on your memory being more comprehensive than mine.
Well,
no, I'm just anal.
Well, Scott, I have not been able to cover, I wanted to cover the specifics and the particularities of the Oreshnik strike that occurred in response to the CIA and U.S. Assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin. So could you talk about this? Like, what exactly happened? The Oreshnik slammed into Lviv, which is right on the Polish border. There was a significant message sent here, and so I was wondering if you could help our audience understand what is significant about this second use of the Oreshnik and what exactly happened.
Well, there's going to be an awful lot of speculation here, so just understand, because nobody's come out and. What I'll say is this: the first Oreshnik attack was done by a test missile. The Russians said it was an operational test. And if you look at the strike, the warheads struck in relatively the same area. They picked 6 different targets within the same narrow geographical space in Dnipro. This strike by a second Oreshnik, there were 6 distinct physically separated targets. I think there was an aircraft refurbishment facility that might have taken 3. When I say 3, it's 6. The 6 submunitions, 3 independently target warheads, 6 submunitions, boom, boom, boom. But one of them went off and hit the strategic gas position, and I think that they hit other targets. So what the Russians demonstrated this time is because they were saying, it just comes in and it's not accurate. The Russians went, watch this. See, it's separated. And now see what happens. The 6 independently targeted things go and hit 6 distinct targets that are, the Oreshnik has a greater, so the Russians gave away a very big operational detail about the Oreshnik, that it's not just concentrated in one area. It's 6 separate, targetable maneuvering warheads that put it down with precision on where they need to go. So that's a signal that the Russians sent too about capability. The Russians have been, the Oreshnik has gone into serial production. That was announced, a while back, but it actually began, I think, in August is when the first serial produced missile came off of the production line in Votkinsk. Since that time, they've put together a brigade. That's 3 battalions of 3 launchers each. That's 9 missiles. There's a 10th missile used there for training purposes. So 10 missiles serial produced out of Votkinsk between August and December when this brigade went operational. But the Russians have said there are other brigades forming up as well. The launch didn't come from an operational unit. The launch came from Kapustin Yar. When Putin first announced the Oreshnik, he said it was an operational test, and he said we have several of these assembled together, but it's a test missile. We don't have it's not gone into serial production. It is in serial production now. Those missiles are going to operational brigades in the Belarusian military. Well, it's actually a Russian brigade in Belarus, jointly commanded, and then other brigades that are up there. This missile was a test missile as well. It's sort of funny to just tell a little war story here. They're looking at the debris, and somebody goes, "Look, there's a lamp in there, a lamp, an old Soviet lamp in there. This isn't sophisticated." When I was a weapons inspector in Votkinsk, we used this thing called the stage measuring device. So you pop the lid off the missile, and you're supposed to slide the stage measuring device down into the missile, and then they had optic things. You're measuring the gap between the stages to make sure that the second stage wasn't the same as an SS-20, but it had to be illuminated. And so down there they had lamps. And I remember, and now this is a solid propellant thing. We had to wear anti-static clothing and touch ourselves clean before we got up anywhere near this missile. I wasn't on this test. I wish I was. I'd kill myself. But I had a good friend who was, John Sartorius. And so they slide it down there, and they're down there, and all of a sudden that lamp down there goes, there's a surge. The lamp blows up inside the launch canister of a solid rocket missile, and everybody just freezes. And about 10 seconds later, one of the soldiers goes, "Well, we're still alive." And so they pull the thing out, and now there's shards of glass down there. And they're like, "Well, we need another lamp." Now, the Soviets had told, because when the Americans were looking at it going, "There's a lamp on this. This is a very special made lamp made by this factory in Moscow specifically for this." The Russians went out to a standard, I think it was a truck, and they took out the headlight. They took the lamp off the headlight, and they came in and they soldered it on there and said, "We can go again." And the Americans were like, "We ain't doing that." My point is, the Russians, when they do testing, there's things in there that are sort of soldered in there, to test. That lamp isn't part of the operating system of the Irashnik. That lamp is probably in there to illuminate parts of the missile as it goes through vibration tests. Kapustin Yar has an off-road area where they take the launcher and they run it around, and then they bring it back and see if they can raise it up and see if the gyros spin up, and they do all these tests on it so that if something breaks, they go, "Oh, wait, we got to fix that," and then they send it back to the Moscow Institute of Thermal Technology, and they think about it and they come up with fixes, and it goes to Votkinsk, and they put together a test missile and they send it out to Kapustin Yar and they test it. The Russians fired a test missile, which again means that the Russians aren't showing the full capacity of this missile, but they showed enough. They fired a missile that this time the warheads separated and hit 6 distinct targets. But these weren't operational missiles. Those missiles are now deployed. It'll be a different game the day the Russians stop firing the Ereshnik from Kapustin Yar, because that's still a demonstration. They fire it from an actual operational unit, that's war. But the Russians are fed up, Ray. I mean, all these guys who advise the president, the people in parliament, the close advisors of the president, they're all coming out and they are furious. I mean, they want to nuke Europe right now. They straight up the head of the defense committee in the parliament. That's just the equivalent of, whoever runs the House, Armed Service Committee, nuke them. And I'm going to advise the president to nuke them now. Sergei Karagana, very well-known political theorist who is close to Vladimir Putin. We need to use nuclear weapons against Europe now. It's the only thing they'll understand. This is the rhetoric taking place. Now, Vladimir Putin, of course, is much more pragmatic and smart, and he carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, and I don't believe he's going to do that. But we can't be dismissive of the fact that the Russian system is furious that the United States tried to kill their president.
Yeah.
Furious, blind furious.
Yeah, no, I would say that's really important. And Karaganov, of course, has been saying this for, if not decades, at least years. So he's under some pressure to do so, that is, Putin is. And I would just add here, and I think this is something that's really important. 10 years ago, when U.S. and other Western journalists were in St. Petersburg for a big economic conference, Putin invited them to a little around the table briefing. There were about 20 of them, okay? And what he said was, look, I don't know why you guys don't take this seriously. I'm going to tell you what we've had to do because the U.S. has rejected all our initiatives. We're not helpless. We're developing very imaginative systems that the U.S. can't defend against. Now, I don't expect you to write this in your newspapers. I don't even expect you to tell your editors about this, which, of course, Putin was right. But I'm going to tell you what it is. We have the tape of that, okay? Now, 2 years later, in his State of the Union address, Putin got up and did a show and tell about these new, sophisticated, different technology weapons that were going to come online eventually, and now they're online, okay? You know, it's not only the Ireshnik, but the Poseidon and lots of others. Now, what I'm trying to say is, the important thing is that for the first time in my life, much less my professional career, Russia has an advantage on us, not only in conventional arms, but in strategic arms. They have a deterrent that won't quit. My question, why is it that no intelligence or armed forces intelligence outfit has acknowledged that and has said to the President of the United States, look, you know, we need to cry uncle here. We're not going to prevail against the Russians, much less the Russians and the Chinese. Why is it, Scott, that people don't know that the Russians have an advantage now that they never had before, and that we should stop tweaking the bear?
Look, Ray, I'm not in the intelligence business anymore. You know, and so it's hard to know what that, but I take a look at the theories that come out from people who are connected, you know, because of course we don't get to read the actual classified intelligence reports put out by the various missile analytical departments in the intelligence community. But there's a theory right now that we don't need to worry about the Ireshnik because when the Russians started mass producing the Iskander and the Zircon and the Kinzhal, they maxed out their aluminum perchlorate capability, aluminum powder. And there's only that one factory in Novosibirsk, and the satellite imagery doesn't show that that factory is expanded, and therefore there's this bottleneck. And so now they want to talk about building Oreshnik, but that's a bigger missile that's going to consume a lot more material, and therefore they can't do it. They're bluffing. And plus, you know, we're taking a look at the YARS modernization program. There's all these competing factors out there for this limited quantity material. And I look at their analysis, and I have to respond by saying that you don't know. I mean, I can't get into the sources and methods here, but I know what they used to be able to do in terms of collection. They maybe got better, but the Russians have not just sat there being a static target. They change up too. The Russian relationship with China is a completely different relationship, and so is the Russian relationship with North Korea. And both of those nations produce the various materials that they say are in short supply now, the raw materials. And all I know is that when I was in Russia, when I went to Novosibirsk, when I went to Ekaterinburg, of course, I didn't have access to the classified. There was just a lot of cranes, The Russians are building things. And there's probably facilities out there that we just don't have a clue what they're doing. I remember how shocked people were when Vladimir Solovyov went up to Victory Park on that complex north of Moscow, where they have this giant cathedral and this wonderful museum about World War II. But adjacent to it is a facility. And it turns out that's where they were sort of building up the Berezvestnik drone unit. But they did it there to avoid detection. But Solovyov made a mistake and did a video, and it allowed people to do geolocating. And there it is. My point is, I think Russia's full of places that are doing things right now that we just don't have a clue. I mean, the CIA is shut down. They don't have any eyes operable inside Russia, not like they used to. And, satellites are only good when they look at things you look at a roof, you're looking at a roof. I mean, they ain't that good yet. They can't go through the roof. And
Well,
unless
you can actually now with radar and infrared and
right,
multi-spectrum.
but I can also counter that just through simple heat layering and reflectors. I mean, but my point is I think the United States is flying blind on this, and I think there's also a lot of wishful thinking. We have been posturing the Russians as weak for so long that we can't accept the fact that the Russians are actually strong, that they can produce things in quantities and in quality that are beyond our imagination. They're getting ready. We talked about the drone revolution has made the tank obsolete. No, you know what Russia's been doing? They're building a tank that has built onto it modern advanced anti-drone technology, and they're assembling armor forces now that have this technology for breakout. Now, when and where that's going to happen, I don't know. People are saying it might come down through Chernihiv, maybe through Sumy. But the point is, the Russians are getting ready to reinvent the battlefield, and using new technology, advanced technology that we're still trying to learn how to do basic drone warfare, where the Russians and Ukrainians are masters at this. But drone warfare has reached sort of the pinnacle of where it can go. Now the question is, do you just have static trench warfare, or do you come up with new tactics and new equipment like the Germans did, at the end? And the Russians are doing that right now. And we're just clueless. We're clueless about Russia.
Well, I thought that the Russian economy was falling apart. Scott, that's what the president said just the other day. Would the president be ill-informed on that, do you suppose?
I think the president is as ill-informed as it gets. I also think this president doesn't care what other people tell him. I think the president gets something in his mind. Look, this is a man who basically said international law doesn't matter. The
Only my morals.
The only thing that matters is my morality. The man who was on more airplanes with Epstein than anybody else, his morality.
Great.
Sorry I went there. I apologize for that.
No, I mean, that's relevant. Any final comments, gentlemen, before we head out? Ray?
Just, I'm glad that over the next couple of weeks, February 5 is when New START expires. I see that maybe, Scott, I'd ask you if you agree with this. If there's no response, or if there's a negative response from the President of the United States to do this simple thing of just renewing for one more year the quantitative limits of New START, then I think then I think Putin will finally have to say, all right, bring the fat lady in here. It's all over. No more arms control. Do you agree with that?
Look, Ray, I'm going to try and be optimistic and agree with you. My only problem is that this defense budget, while we've been talking disarmament and all that stuff, the American nuclear weapons enterprise has been positioning to get funding for the mass production of plutonium pits. And that's budgeted now. There's money in the budget. They're doing this. They're building the pits. Why would you build new, and we're talking thousands of plutonium pits? Why would you do this if you're agreeing to caps? I think the president's already made his mind up. I think that he's already, he's just not going to give it away. But, when he said the other day, they said New START's expiring. He said, so it expires. So
this will sound trite, but I believe that a Nobel Peace Prize is very much in Trump's distorted mind. I mean,
he's going to steal it from some Venezuelan chick.
It sounds adolescent to suggest this, but if he doesn't say yes to renewing those limits on New START, I think that may only disqualify him. I do think that's an element in his thinking about such things, as odd as that may seem to the rest of us rational people.
You don't think kidnapping Maduro and getting ready to preemptively launch a war against Iran would disqualify?
No, I know those Nobel Peace Prize folks. All I need to do is
as long as they support it, right? As long as they support the wars.
They can do it.
As long as the Peace Prize Committee supports the wars, it's okay, I guess. I mean, Obama did get one after all, right? All right, everybody. This was a great show. It was a huge show. I think it was very, very fair.
Coffee. Follow me